We find our protagonists, the Dark Lords of the Sith, conferring in Plagueis' penthouse as Palpatine rehearses his impending victory speech where he will be placed into Chancellorship.
I would like to thank an invisible benefactor to the Republic, one Hago Damask. Dumas financially responsible for the resettlement acts way out in the...
I'm sorry. Yes, you flatter me, my apprentice. Do go on.
Dumas fundings allowed beings to blaze new hyperspace routes, far beyond any... The whole drinking through your nose thing is very distracting. Could you just not?
Well, I'm sorry. I can't help that I almost died. This is a delicacy I've scarcely had in nearly 30 years. Can't a moon just enjoy a little blue milk in peace?
Well, I'd appreciate it if you were at least trying to listen.
Yes, okay, I'm all ears. Do go on.
Thank you. As I was saying, I would like to thank my competitors in this election, even though we see different sides of the... He was killed in his sleep. Ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself.
Yeah, I ain't buying that either, bro.
Archive memory access. If an item does not appear in our records, it does not exist.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Tales from the Archives. I am Grayson of Mortis FM, and with me is the Tales from the Archives crew. Connor, we'll start with you.
Hello there. Connor from Beyond the Dune Sea.
Seth from Beyond the Dune Sea.
It's you, Tony.
Oh, Tony from Star Wars. Sorry, I missed the last one. I was stuck working. I'm here now, though, guys.
Cole from Mortis FM, holding Darth Plagueis, the book, the movie, the show, the podcast.
And Bobby Moynihan. No, hi, Will, Diamondfigs, Dark Side Secrets, and I'm Will from Tales of the Archives. How about that?
Yeah.
Ooh, let's go.
I like to hear.
Yes, you are. Guys, we are wrapping up Plagueis by James Luceno. I think we are covering chapters 16 to the very end. So if any of you have been going along with us, we're about to cover the whole book, what we read, and basically just our all-encompassing thoughts. So before we get into kind of the chapter by chapter basis, overall, what did we think of this book for our first book that we finished?
Don't be shy.
You should go first.
Oh, me? It's good, guys. I thought it was pretty neat. Okay, so I had very little expectations going in. I'd heard that it was good. It's a very well-revered book in the Star Wars community. I did not expect it to parallel Phantom Menace as much as it did towards the end. That was very fascinating. Seeing the intense machinations of the Sith. I've often heard this book called R-rated Star Wars, and
yeah.
It gets there a few times. And again, just the Plagueis as a character is very fascinating. I think that as the book goes, it's cool to see him sort of narratively, he sort of decays out of the story just like he does as a person, and so I think that's cool. But yeah, good book, good stuff.
Yeah. Seth, what'd you think, man?
Just wanted the book, that's all. So I had something to hold in my hand. So I liked it. I did think it was really interesting, and you kind of touched on it a second ago, that like the back half of this book should really just be called Darth Sidious, because Darth Plagueis really just kind of background, and he kind of pays for that, and I do think that that's really interesting, and we'll get to that. But I really enjoyed this book. This is a lot of fun. And it's cool how it really kind of, like anything, you want to learn more about like what's going on in movies and stuff like that. And this really builds out that world of what's going on in Star Wars at the time of the Phantom Menace, and how things kind of all got set into motion. So
yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I really enjoy, you know, in the beginning of the book, it feels like we see kind of Plagueis, I would say maybe in his prime. Maybe he wouldn't define it as that, but then you get that like transition in him with Palpatine, and then really just the kind of focus on Palpatine, which I knew that it was going to focus a lot more on Palpatine later on, and then eventually we get stuff with Maul until we're basically just completely synchronous with the Phantom Menace. The book finishes post the Phantom Menace, which we will get into, like you guys said, but R-rated Star Wars indeed. There's some points where I was like, okay, I get it. I understand why. And there's one thing in particular that we'll get into. We're going to try to go for more of a chapter by chapter basis to kind of keep it a little bit more organized. But I loved the book, and I see why it is so, like you said, so revered in the Star Wars community. I think it was a great book that for us to start on. And it makes me excited for the future.
Nice. So
it's you. Yeah.
This is me. This is me. Is this thing on? Testing. So I enjoyed it a ton. And before reading it, I think Retney was the one that said the book is basically episode 0. And it really is. It really is like episode 0. It ties into the Phantom Menace, and it even ties into other things in the saga as well, which is very interesting to see how this person got power here and this thing there. And I'm like, oh, so I enjoyed it a ton, and it just makes me want to read more of all the other people they referenced throughout the book, like Darth Bane and a lot of other names that were name dropped a lot. It's like, I want more. So I loved it.
Yeah. I think the Phantom Menace supplemental was really good. I thought that it was a super strong book. In terms of like R-rated Star Wars, I'm inclined to agree, but I also just really appreciate just how seriously it takes Star Wars. Like when you're reading this, like it feels like you're just straight up reading history, in just like a very seriously made way. And I think, I mean, I had never read any of James Luceno's books, but his writing style is really, really good. It's very compelling to follow. And this was definitely, I think this exceeded my expectations. I didn't think it would be this good, but I really liked it.
As a remedial thinking person who only can think in memes, this is what I thought of the entire time we were reading the back half of the book. I felt like the entire time. Like the closer we got to the Phantom Menace and the closer we got to what was going on within that world was, I was like so encapsulated with what was going on. From reading this prior to when we were doing our reread, I guess reread for me, and I know Seth, that was what I was looking forward to most, was that part of the book, and getting to see, as much as it is Plagueis, and the Plagueis stuff is very cool, the Sidious side of things and the eyes outside of what you see in the Phantom Menace is my favorite part, and this just solidified it even more. That world building, like everybody said, but this is something where if they did, like, this is all stuff that I envision as deleted scenes of what should have been in the Phantom Menace. If you were to go into like DVD extras and this was what was going on, or there were animatics for all of this, that's how I picture all of that story in my head. I know a lot of this, because it's Legends, isn't technically canon anymore, but this has always been my head canon, and now it will be very hard doing the reread of it to rewatch Phantom Menace and not think of all of this going on.
You know what it's like to comparables to something actually in canon. This kind of feels like the Siege of Mandalore, but for like the Phantom Menace, where it's happening concurrently, where it's like, oh, you don't know all this stuff that's happening, and it syncs up really nicely.
I totally agree.
Sorry, I'm cracking up because Connor and Seth are having somebody just was like, Seth, Connor, just like, and I was like, what was that about?
Ignore him. That's my friend.
Oh, I've seen some of your shorts, Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
My God. Yeah, I did. Oh, anyway,
Hunter helps out behind the scenes on occasion. So,
oh really?
He's behind the Dune Sea. He's behind the Dune Sea.
Hey, don't leak our that's something we're working on there, Will.
Oh, so sorry. I didn't know. Bed Bath and Beyond the Dune Sea.
Yes,
dude.
Perfect sponsorship.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna try to go through, and I'll be honest, I have not refined these notes, so bear with me if some of the chapters are a little longer for their summaries, and some are like literally a paragraph. So I'm gonna try to go through. Of course, we are naturally going to talk about things in other media and whatnot, but we're going to try to kind of stick to a more regimented chapter by chapter basis. So we're starting off with chapter 16. This is what I have for my chapter summary. Palpatine traverses through a windy feed, thinking of Vidar Kim's upcoming assassination. As he does so, he doubts his master and questions his motives. Was Palpatine expendable to him? Palpatine reaches Vidar Kim's office, finding him disheveled and frantic. Vidar Kim believes that King T'Palo and Ars Varuna orchestrated the death of his family as a form of threat. If you guys don't remember, Vidar Kim's family got killed. Kim goes plans to go to Coruscant to immediately share this information with the Jedi, and also for his son, who is also a Jedi, Ronhar Kim, to try to convince him to leave and to continue the Kim bloodline. Right after Palpatine meets with one of our kind of reoccurring ensemble characters, Sate Pestage, who I found out is one of those old guys from Return of the Jedi. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. You know, the old guys with the purple stuff? Yeah. But they plan on the assassination, and Palpatine gives Kim's itinerary. And then we kind of switch over to Plagueis, where he is discussing with the people of Kamino about one of the Yinchori, which is a kind of a army he's trying to facilitate. And the Kaminoans agree to take on the task, but they need more funding. But Plagueis, being the homie, he's like, I got you. I got the hookup. So Palpatine then gets word that the assassination was a success, but Ronhar believes he may have been the target, and no leads of the Palpatine were made, and the Senate is shook by the action. So that's chapter 16. Oh, let me go to my notes.
So Sate Pestage is really that old dude in the hat.
You like broke my brain a little bit. I literally just went to go look all that stuff
you were
up.
Just casually dropping.
Yeah. Sorry.
Like,
there's Sate Pestage, and then the other one. There's two other guys. Those are all the dudes in the purple hats from Return of the Jedi. That's his like little ensemble.
What the heck?
What are the other two guys' names? Do you guys remember off the?
Doriana.
Yes, Kinman Doriana and Janus Grujatus.
Longer than that, because at this point we're still 20 years before Phantom Menace, or are we 30 years before Phantom Menace?
I think at that point.
Right now, Palpatine is still a young man. He's not. We have not hit the point where he's old yet.
The Jedi is like 60 years from this point.
Okay,
they're old. I mean, you go look at those dudes in Return of the Jedi.
I'm like connecting the mental dots here. Yeah. That's interesting, because I've always thought that was interesting. That little band of homies. Because
he's got his.
Who's that other person? She was in a lot of comics recently. The bald one.
Sy Moore.
Yes, Sly Moore. You're right. Yep. That's the other one.
I know that name.
I thought she was part of like like for him like in the Senate. I didn't think.
Yeah,
she
but
went
I think she's one of those people in Return of the Jedi too, right? Or am I
Oh,
wrong?
I
I
don't
don't know. Anyway,
There's a
off
lot of connections, and I'll get into some of my summaries of things that might also blow your mind because I didn't really. You'll see, but yeah, in this chapter, I was I mean, it's not it's a lot of exposition and kind of setup, and we'll kind of get to that. But I like the orchestration of the assassination, and we kind of get to it a little bit later. But Ronhar is kind of an interesting parallel to Anakin in a way, where he's like kind of befriending this young man and stuff, and Vidar Kim's like he's also kind of a weird foil to Palpatine, where like his family is killed, but he's like, oh, I'm gonna like kind of take you under my wing. And they don't get a whole lot into it, because I will also say Ronhar Kim is apparently in other comic books, which is why his character kind of fizzles out. There's like, I mean, I could go and lay it on you guys if you want, but there's like this book connects to like 5 other Star Wars projects that is kind of nuts. One, we'll get to it, but this one, I think the Ronhar Kim, he is in one of the Clone Wars comic books from the early 2000s.
Really?
He's one of the main Jedi.
Right.
Yeah. So they were kind of planting little threads in there, but yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything that you guys wanted?
His character design looks like the way Obi-Wan was going to look in early concept art from Ralph McQuarrie for Phantom Menace. Like
interesting.
The man bun with the sideburns and the long hair, kind of like what they did with Qui-Gon, but he's in like the black leather for like there's stuff of him on Naboo and running around the Gungans. It almost looks exactly like the way Obi-Wan did in all of that. That's actually very interesting.
Is that the wait, Ralph McQuarrie? Are you talking about the stuff from the prequels or the original
Or
trilogy?
not McQuarrie. What's his name?
Doug Chang?
Doug Chang.
Is it the one where he's got like is that the Qui-Gon? There's one where, because they show both of them, and I think Qui-Gon has like, he almost looks more like a Kurosawa character.
Yeah, there's 2. There's one where he's like running from Gungan tanks and it's in the swamps, and then there's another one where he's in like this what I would assume is the ship from the beginning of Phantom Menace, and it's more gold background, and it's all of the what are the rolling droids called? The droidicas. Those are all like he's fighting those, and he has a green lightsaber, but he's wearing like black leather.
Yeah,
we'll see if I can find it. But
kind of alludes to.
I remember that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to specifically talk about. This chapter.
I think this chapter just does a good. My only note is that I think it does a great job of setting up or just kind of showing us how great Palpatine it is at pushing people in certain directions and like playing both sides.
And he's also, I think Plagueis even mentions with Sate Pestage, he's like, Plagueis tells him, like, you know, you'd be wise to kind of keep this guy in your circle, you know, which alludes to what happens because he's, I guess he does because he's all the way in Return of the Jedi. So.
Well, I mean, that does happen later. I mean, when spoiler alert, later on, when Palpatine saves Plagueis from the assassination attempt, he's there and he's like, hey, you know, like it or not, you're part of our club now.
Yeah. You're an Avenger now.
Yeah.
I will
say about that was the Kaminoan stuff was cool. I mean, it sets the stage well.
It's interesting that like they were trying to create an army to go up against the Jedi as opposed to fight alongside of the Jedi. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well, but you're starting to get those teases.
It's cool that we get little pieces of the plan.
Yeah.
We get like Palpatine suggesting, oh, we need like individual assassins for all of them. And then that leads them to this point. And then that leads them to this point. And then maybe a clone army. And then we need a specific type of species, you know?
Yeah. What was the name of, I'm sorry, I want to check because it kind of becomes important later on. What was the name of the faction that kills Kim? They were like specifically like we need to use these guys.
The Maladians or something?
Maladians, yeah. Malady.
they all have the little hats.
They all wear fedoras.
It's in the Canton Circle chapter. They take off their razor-tipped fedoras and throw them.
They're like what's his Odd Job from James Bond.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny. Am I still on? Oh yeah, because they even referenced like the Mandalorian Death Watch and the Bando.
I thought that was fascinating.
It's interesting reading through this book and how much it lines up with stuff that's actually in Clone Wars, because this was written when Clone Wars was happening. Right. And I didn't know that.
I still can't get over that Sate Pestage is the old dude, because I always in the book I'm just imagining him as like this drifter type, because he just kind of looks like a smuggler maybe. I don't know why I envisioned that in my head, because I mean apparently he's pretty good with the blaster. So
and then he ruins his drip.
And he ruins his drip.
Yeah, Maladians.
Cool purple robe.
Yeah,
he does.
Yeah. He's slick in his old age. You know? He's like,
hope I look that good.
Apparently, James Luceno has a thing for those guys, though, because in the book that he wrote about Tarkin, I guess they play a larger role in that too.
So, that's his gluff poopos right there. Keeping it PG, guys.
Are they even in Return of the Jedi except for that one shot?
I don't think so. Yeah, they're just standing. It's when Palpatine turns around and they're like, "Okay, we need to huddle up now." And it's just
like Vader comes in and talks to him for a second, and he's like, "Get out of here!" I know. Yeah, it's like I'm with my friends.
Alone, Vader.
I'm hanging out.
Yeah. Dude, we're playing Battlefront. Leave us alone.
Drinking some brewskis with the Sith boys, Yeah. Well, so let's get into chapter 17 then, and there's some definitely some stuff to speak about in here. This one's a little bit of shorter recap. Palpatine visits Coruscant for Vidar Kim's funeral, and he speaks with Ronhar, kind of befriending each other. But then we switch over to Plagueis, who is on Sereno, where he at this kind of summit encounters Jocasta Nu, Qui-Gon, Sifo Dyas, and Dooku all there. And he basically discusses with them that he expects a turn on the Republic from outlying systems, and also kind of plants the seeds for Sifo to investigate the Kaminoans a little bit. Yes. So Seth, go ahead and get out your frustrations. Qui-Gon is in this book.
My favorite Jedi. Don't you guys know that? He's so cool. Like it's really so neat cool. that he's Qui-Gon in it up. So it's good stuff.
He's Qui-Gon and all over the place.
He's Qui-Gon and over here. He's Qui-Gon and over there. I mean, you can't stop that. Anyway, I killed him.
He's Qui-Gon over there. He's Qui-Gon. You can't stop that. That's my new favorite thing that you've ever said.
You can't. But what an entourage, man. I mean, he's going around with Dooku and Sifo Dyas.
Yeah, and Jocasta Nu.
Yes, and Jocasta Nu.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
She's librarian, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Before she's the librarian. Before she's the librarian. Yeah.
I assume so. I assume she's not
before she goes into Jedi retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how old she is at this point, because Attack of the Clones, she's pretty old. But then in the Vader comic, she's got like a freaking ancient rifle, Anyway,
she got a sniper in the Vader comic.
Yeah, but this chapter is really good. I love also the plants for Dooku as well. That Dooku is he's very subtly frustrated with the Jedi. Like I was reading this and I was like, what you were saying, Will, earlier about like how this is very, supplemental to the Phantom Menace and everything. A lot of the events that happen in this, although the very end, there's some Dooku stuff, kind of contradicts it a little bit, but it still fits in really well with what we see in Dooku's fall in canon.
And Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah. Yes.
Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah. I was a big fan of like it's crazy that there's 4 Jedi there, and Plagueis is so skilled that like he is eradicated. Yeah. Which I guess
that part blew my mind when because it was like Dooku, Sifo Dyas, and there's another one, and Plagueis saw them, and then he just walked over there and talked to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the scene. And I'm like, man, this guy has some balls to go over there, him being a Sith Lord. And it was crazy that they didn't sense it in him at all, which is like showing like, you know, the Jedi were blind back then and focused on other things when they had Darth Plagueis right in front of you, like talking to you, like one of us could be Darth Plagueis and we don't even know.
Yeah.
I think it's like a testament to because you hear from both of their perspectives pretty much, where they're like, I really want to test they're wanting to test their abilities. And so they almost seek Jedi just so that they can get the thrill of being in their presence and go like, you don't know that it's me.
They're like cat burglars where they just steal stuff just for the rush of stealing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the man in the back.
It is kind of weird though, because like they almost describe the Force like that, where like in this book, it's like if you're on with the dark side, you can kind of like turn it off. Like you've just got to be like, all right, you're not making any ripples. But as soon as we start using it, you're gonna really start like, you know, like cause reverberations through everything. So it's like it's all or nothing.
It's really interesting how it's basically described. It's described as like a signal that just kind of pulsates through the galaxy whenever something goes off.
They said that, like, we talked about it last stream as well, but there was one Sith Lord that he did cause like one ripple. They don't ever say his name. I think we talked about it. It was somebody's master.
Master of
It was the Twi'lek Master. It was so-and-so's Twi'lek Master.
Yes. They never gave him a name. Yeah. And like he was it kind of made the Jedi a little scared, but that was all they got, you know?
Yes, yeah.
And they were kind of like, yeah, don't worry about that. That's fine. Right. But they never really say what it is, though, which is interesting. And they talk about it later on as well, but I find it...
Some with the holocron?
I'm not sure.
I think it was messing with the holocron.
They also mentioned this one Sith Lord that I had to do a little bit of research on, and he was basically the Sith that, and this is not in this chapter, maybe it is actually, I gotta scroll through here. But in this chapter, he basically, not in this chapter, in the book, he basically screwed everything up for the Sith. Like if it was because he like wiped out a ton of like the recordings and like the ancient teachings, and I cannot remember. He basically like moved over, like he kind of swapped the light side, or he kind of like ruined the Sith way of thinking. I cannot remember his name.
And he like tried to seal him and his apprentice away.
Yes. He like locked himself in.
Basically, like only walked away with one arm and like a burnt face and stuff like that. Yeah. That was cool. I also like how at the end of this chapter, Plagueis is about to reveal to Sifo-Dyas about just the name of Kamino. But then like
Force intervenes.
It's like it's described as like the Force reaches up and kind of grabs him by the throat to get him to stop, so that Jocasta Nu, who doesn't know what Kamino is in Attack of the Clones, doesn't hear that. So again, it gives like credence to that theory that it's basically like, you know, it's just the will of the Force making this stuff happen.
There are so many points from like this chapter on towards the end of the book where Plagueis, specifically Plagueis, will just chalk stuff up to the will of the Force in like almost kind of an annoying way of like the Force is tampering with us, or this must be because of the Force balancing stuff out. It was almost annoying at times the way he would just kind of write stuff off as that's just the will of the Force, almost in the kind of the way that Seth doesn't really like Qui-Gon for, was kind of that. It was just like it's kind of the will of the Force, but and Plagueis would just go about his day. Whereas I think that was part of his downfall was his own, I guess if you want to call it blindness. His mentality was so focused on everything else. It was just crazy to me.
Qui-Gon's Qui-Gon over here. Plagueis is Plagueis over there.
It makes me think then is Plagueis kind of like a dark side foil for Qui-Gon in a way?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Like he's I mean, especially at the end. I mean, he's terrified of Qui-Gon.
Yeah,
like, he's terrified. And you're talking about like the how he writes things off as the will of the dark side, and I think that shows an extreme arrogance on their part, because Lucino is writing from their perspective, so the audience is being led to believe that it is the dark side is its own entity, separate from the light side or the Force itself. When in reality, I think what's actually happening is yes, the Force is sort of guiding events to ultimately lead to Anakin, because that's where everything converges on Anakin at the end of the story, which I thought was very interesting. I didn't expect that when we got there, which I know we'll get there in more detail. But in this moment specifically, talking about the end of chapter 17, when the Force, kind of grabs the word Camino out of Plagueis's mouth, because he can't say that right now. Ultimately, that does lead, when he does say it, to the downfall of the Jedi. But he has to say it at the right moment so that it can lead to the downfall of the Jedi, but also the rise of Anakin Skywalker, which is incredibly fascinating that the Force would guide Plagueis in that way to do that.
I really can't think of other times in Star Wars where the Force intervenes in that way, where it's like so abrupt outside, like him not being able to speak because the Force does not want him to, because he cannot say Camino. I can't really think of other instances. There's a few times in this book where that happens, but outside of this book, I really can't think of another time where, maybe you guys can, where the Force just outright stops somebody from doing something or forces somebody to do something without, like, not having their, I guess, intention.
You know what that reminds me of, actually? I can't think of a moment in Star Wars, but maybe I can explain it with a Lord of the Rings reference. So in The Hobbit, Iluvatar, who is God in the universe, equating that to the Force, guides the ring to Bilbo. It's such an inconsequential thing in the story for the god of that world to do. And it seems so small, but in the world of Tolkien, it's one of the very, very few times that Iluvatar ever directly intervenes. And so that reminds me very much of this moment where just saying the word Camino is such a small, seemingly inconsequential thing, but it would cause a chain reaction that would upend the entire future of the world.
Yeah.
And so the Force literally intervening in this moment in this sort of deified way, I think is very similar, where it's like, they even say this later. They're like, the Force works in mysterious ways, but even they mock that. They're like, no, to say that, is to say that a mystery can't be solved, or whatever the quote is. But that's, I don't know that there's a moment specifically in Star Wars, maybe outside of a book, that I'm not thinking of, but that's kind of what I can think of when it comes to that.
The only other thing I can think of that's kind of like that, and I don't even think it's canon anymore, I think it was just a throwaway story. Do you guys know the R5 Force sensitive thing, where like,
when I sent you,
where like he blows up because he knows that R2's the one who's supposed to go with him, because he's like weirdly Force sensitive. That's the only instance that I can like kind of pin this towards, of like, all right, R5, you're coming with me. Oh, this one's got a blah, 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 blah. And then he sets on fire. Obviously, we see him later in Mandalorian, but like outside of that, which who even knows if that's, I don't think that's canon anymore.
No, in the Legends, it was the Force sensitivity, and from a certain point of view, R2 is like, "Hey, I need to be
right." Yeah, he's like, "I gotta get out of here. You gotta help me. We're buddies in this."
Yeah,
it would be so funny if
in Legends he was Force sensitive, and it was weird.
It'd be so funny if James Luceno wrote that, though, and it's like, as R5 was going towards the Lars homestead, the Force reached through him and said, "Die," and then he blew up.
She's the motivator.
Yeah, it's the bad motivator.
Motivator, bro.
Yeah.
The Force was his motivator to bust his motivator. That's our time, folks.
Yep.
We'll see you.
See you
Thank
guys
you for tuning in.
year.
We'll be here all next week.
The last thing before we completely move on, I wanted to say about chapter 17. And real quick, not to derail us completely, but to shout out Jeremy Bloor in our chat for being a member. He just became a member. Appreciate that. He's been here.
Legend. I know the name very well.
He's a great dude.
Way to go, Jeremy.
But the last thing I wanted to say was, this is the first time we see Qui-Gon in the book, is in chapter 17. And he is, he bites back against Plagueis.
Yeah,
he does,
in a very real way. And Plagueis has a lot of respect for that. And so does Dooku. And I think that's very interesting, given the trajectory as we go, is like, you're already seeing these seeds being set, is that Dooku will ultimately stray away from the Jedi, diving into the dark side, whereas Qui-Gon will do the same, but in the opposite direction. He will go toward the will of the Force, and the Jedi themselves go into complacency. And so it's interesting to see this sort of fork in the road. And Dooku is very agreeable with Plagueis, and they have this mutual respect for Qui-Gon, being like, I'm not with you on this, guys. Sorry. And he has to actually get up and leave the conversation because he's getting frustrated.
Also, Sifo Dyas, he is like he's kind of like a diehard Republic guy. And Plagueis he's like arguing with him. And then Sifo Dyas is at one point, he basically is like, oh yeah, but like those planets wouldn't be able to, and Plagueis is like, kind of gives him this look of like, that's exactly what I'm saying. And Sifo Dyas is like, like, it's it's very interesting how all three of those characters are so crucial throughout the next 2 decades or beyond. I don't remember even what year they were currently in. But it's pretty cool. Good, Seth.
I just wanted to echo what you just said about how, so you've got Qui-Gon and Plagueis, and they're on different paths, or like they're kind of on the same path, but then they kind of splinter off. And it's kind of neat that like Plagueis takes a selfish path, while Qui-Gon kind of takes a selfless path with finding the chosen one. And Plagueis is all like just inward thinking and trying to keep.
Oh yeah, there's a mirror there. I guess I didn't consider that.
Yeah.
And those two direct foils of each other have the most heated debate in that scene.
Yeah. It also makes me, the reason I think it's kind of an interesting foil is because, Qui-Gon is taken out. Like there's always that what if of like, oh, what if Qui-Gon lived? He was kind of the figure that Anakin needed, and Obi-Wan was the one that he got, sort of thing. It makes me kind of think of like, maybe what if Plagueis had gotten hold of Anakin, but he ends up getting Palpatine, Palpatine ends up getting him. It's kind of like it's an interesting. I think Anakin, if he would have become Vader under Plagueis's rule, would have been very.
That's a fascinating thought. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a train of thought that I had where I'm like, we see a lot of traits that are passed down from Plagueis to Palpatine, and kind of the way that, we end up seeing what Palpatine becomes of being, this physically scarred person and a hermit and whatnot. But like, it's like, it is honestly, their relationship is very much, what is the sins of the father. Like they kind of take those notions, even though Palpatine's like, oh, Plagueis, you old fool. But he ultimately ends up becoming Plagueis. Like that's exactly what he ends up doing.
Well, he goes with the grand plan. I mean, yeah, he's following that. Do you think Anakin would have killed Plagueis?
Yeah.
You think so? Do you think Anakin would have killed Plagueis? Like if Plagueis trained him? Do you think that?
I don't know, because even Palpatine describes Anakin as like a guileless boy, he said. So like he's he at that time, like he's pretty innocent, passionate, but innocent. Palpatine seemed to never really be that way. So I think if potentially Plagueis had raised Anakin like that, Anakin might have seen it as more of a partnership kind of thing. But I really don't know.
It's a great question.
Yeah. Just would have been interesting, because don't you think that Plagueis would have been like, oh, your mom? Well, let's go get her.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out. She can come hang out.
I mean, Plagueis still has a lot more practical approach about the dark side. It feels less sinister, even though they do evil things. That's where it also again feels the inverse to Qui-Gon, where Qui-Gon's a little bit more fast and loose with the light side and the Jedi, and Plagueis is kind of that way with the Sith as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think that Palpatine is just evil. Like he's just evil, whereas Plagueis is open to all of his emotions. And there's several moments in the book where I think it's really fascinating, where he shows like actually some compassion for like Palpatine, and he also for the Hunter's Moon for Sojourn. He's kind of sad when that blows up. He's like, that sucks. I like this place.
Yeah.
There's a really good like allegory for whenever that happens, but I'll get to it later.
Yeah, I wrote that one down too. Yeah.
With the suns and everything.
Yes.
Dude, it's so good.
In the chapter right before this one, just to go Connor off of what you just said, that's when Plagueis says the whole thing of like Plagueis's parting words were, Remember why the Sith are more powerful than the Jedi, because we are not afraid to feel. We embrace the spectrum of emotions from the heights of transcendent joy to the depths of hatred and despair. Fearless, we welcome whatever paths the dark side set us on and whatever destiny it lays out for us. So like, even like compassion, the emotion of compassion, not being afraid of that as something where Sidious probably wouldn't feel that in the same way because of his evil. He's very self-serving, and as much as Plagueis is self-serving in terms of he feels he is destined to set the Sith on this path and that he is the conduit for this to happen, he is still the one channeling the path. So that's what's above all else, is to make sure the plan goes apart. Whereas Sidious is, when, like, for example, when he finds out about Anakin later on, when Dooku's telling him about him and what happened with Qui-Gon and all that stuff on Tatooine and finding the boy, Palpatine's first thought is, how did I not sense him? Not, okay, this is a problem for all of us, and we can talk about it later on too, but it's always intrinsic of, how does this affect me? How can I deal with this? Whereas Plagueis is more, how does this affect the Sith as a whole? I think is really the difference.
Yeah, he has that's like the exact difference of their thoughts there. Is Palpatine's like, how did I not, I sense nothing, whereas Plagueis is like, will this boy be the grand plan's undoing? Will this make us undone?
And that goes back to what you guys were saying earlier about Qui-Gon and all that. There's that passage in the last chapter, is it, where Plagueis is reflecting on all of that, and he's like, Qui-Gon is the key.
Yeah,
like
he literally says,
he does say that, and I'm like, well, there you go.
Yep,
he's clearly the coolest. There you go.
Hey, got him
right there.
We got him.
Yep.
Clip that, folks.
Will, you should have wore your Qui-Gon shirt today.
Okay. I almost did, but it was in the laundry. I was thinking I was supposed to wear it today. I'm so mad that I didn't.
It's okay. I'm gonna read that passage real quick about the dark side, kind of strangling Plagueis, to say this word, and then I'll move on to the next chapter. Plagueis was about to mention Camino when he spied Jocasta Nu approaching, and a feeling from deep in the dark side rose up inside him, strangling his voice box, as if refusing to let the word escape. We already talked about it, but I just think it's very good, very interesting, because he also says
So
not
dope.
the Force. He doesn't say the Force. He says the dark side, which is like,
light
I don't know.
rises, darkness does to meet it.
Yeah, I think that's just because Plagueis is arrogant. That's all.
Oh yeah, well, it's like, it makes me think of the beginning of Force Unleashed 2, where Starkiller is like, has been starved for weeks, and Vader approaches the chamber, and he's just like, the Force gives me all I need, and Vader's like, the Force, and then he corrects himself. He goes the dark side. It's very good stuff.
Before we go on, shout out to all 31 of you guys watching right now. Be sure to hit that like button. We are live streaming this from all our channels, so if you're not familiar with somebody's channel, down in the description is the link to everyone's channel. So be sure to go subscribe, check everybody out, and then also shout out to Isso with the 8-month member chat, throwing the Sidious emoji in. Appreciate you, and shout out to the profile chat.
We're at 149 subscribers. So if one of you guys want to get us to 150, thank you.
Woo! Be that one person.
Get them to 150, guys.
Thank you. Chapter 18. Palpatine preps for the for the historical day. Huh?
You're at 150 already, baby. Let's go.
Let's go. Thank you, guys. If you're already subbed and you're listening right now, thank you so much. And our new episode will be out. New episode will be out beginning of next week, I promise.
That's interesting right there. You understand?
Palpatine preps for the historical day in the Senate as they vote on many Trade Federation planets being added to the Republic. Many are worried that it will lead to let the Trade Federation become too strong. Palpatine meets Dooku and Sifo Dyas, and then is surprised by his master's unannounced visit, which is what you referenced earlier, Tony. And in the vote, Palpatine announces Naboo and his sector are abstaining from the vote in lieu of Vidar Kim's death, which is very, very, very interesting. I'm gonna go to the chapter because it's been a little while, and I need to make sure.
This one was this was a chapter that was a little dry for me.
Yep.
I mean, like, ultimately, it's just kind of more setup, which, you know, I'm fine with.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's
those
just,
the chapters that like get into the politics. One second, Seth. They get into the no. I'm just saying I'm almost done. I don't want you to sit there just like holding your hand the whole time. Yeah, the chapters that get really into the politics and everything, I enjoy. But I talked to Cole about this. There's a lot of times where because Palpatine plays both sides, and like, okay, what is his goal here? You know, with the Trade Federation and things like that. So I'll have to go back and like reread a few times, and it's like, okay, like they're pro Trade Federation, no, they're anti Trade Federation. Oh, they like Newt Gunray, although they don't like Newt Gunray. It's just it can get a little confusing, but it's still really good. Seth.
Well, I think it's two things. I do think it's interesting that Palpatine, he doesn't even sense Plagueis, does he? Like, it's just like, oh my gosh, you're here. Like, so it's like, that works both ways with what we were talking about. It's like, Plagueis can just turn it off for anybody. It's like, you can't even sense me, which is wild. And then two, I've always kind of felt like that they were playing literally both sides. Like, whatever way we can make work, that's just going to be how we're going to do it. That it was never always going to just be the clones, like, betraying the, or like the Republic winning. It was just that, like, that's how it worked out, if that makes sense. That if it did, if the Trade Federation had some sort of advantage, then they would have picked the Trade Federation. It's just how the cards fell, I guess.
True. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's part of the brilliance of, I think, both Palpatine and Plagueis, and you see that with Palpatine throughout all of Star Wars media, is that he's both a planner, but also he can take a situation and just flip it and twist it and do what he needs to do with it.
Yeah.
It shows just the power of that. And it also shows the power of someone like James Luceno, because that is tough to write, I think. I think that's a really difficult thing to spin. It's difficult to show that it's not just convenience, that you're just writing convenience. But no, it really feels like these are like, they're making these plans, but they're looking out for every opportunity that, oh, hey, the Trade Federation, this stuff's working out. We'll go ahead and we'll pursue that. And if it doesn't, well, okay, we'll go this direction. They're always 10 steps ahead.
Literally playing both sides.
And you can't be
Connor, I think you said it on one of the earlier streams about Thrawn, like using that as an example in the comics of like him just being somebody who was thrust upon Palpatine, like, I can use him, kind of like that sort of deal of like just using what's presented in almost the same way that like we're just going to keep bringing him up, like the whole Qui-Gon thing of like the Force will present itself to you, like that sort of deal of kind of the opposite from somebody who I guess is on the light side of the Force, but just waiting for that to happen to you rather than continuously trying to plan your track out, which is the biggest thing I think for Plagueis's downfall that we see later on. Is his planning is just obvious. He's blinded by his own plan.
Well, they're opportunists, you know. Even Palpatine showing up when Hago got to Theed, he sees Palpatine. He's like, yeah, all right, we'll go with this. I'll do this, you know. Yes, sir.
I mean, they're selfish. They're both selfish in like different ways. It's weird.
Yeah.
Because like, why does Palpatine ultimately get mad at him? It's like, dude, you turned your back. You started hanging out by yourself, and I've been the one orchestrating everything. Yeah. So when it's like
it's like a group project, but one guy's doing all the work. You know.
It's true. Yeah. And like they're both doing different parts, but like it's weird. They're both being selfish in different ways. That it's like
a funny way of putting it.
Crazy.
I mean, it shows the folly of the Sith in general.
Yes.
It's like, I
mean, very like they're all like it's all about me. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plagueis almost nails it down, but like we talked about this on our last stream. Like Plagueis's plan only works if another Plagueis exists. And it just
he was trying to cultivate another Plagueis, but he just continued.
He should have cloned himself.
He literally found the devil. I mean,
not the,
Yeah, I mean that's.
Yeah, I was trying to figure. I think it was interesting in this chapter as well that they talk about where Coruscant. I don't know if it's in this chapter or one of the earlier chapters. I can't remember which. But they talk about the state that Coruscant is in and how it's kind of become like this. it's not what we see in the prequels even. It's become this like haven for like debauchery and kind of basically like a Las Vegas, where it's like even like all of the politicians are corrupt, and I don't even remember the chancellor's name at this point. Is it
Valorum?
Valorum is the one in part
no,
3.
It's like Darius or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
I think I've got it right here. Yeah, Chancellor Darius. You're right.
Yeah.
And it also, like, I think even in the chapter before this, we didn't talk about it. Like, maybe it's later on. They talk about how, maybe it was with Ronhar Kim. They're talking about how like Ronhar is like almost pro like the Jedi should be leading the Senate. You know, there should be a Jedi chancellor. I think that's with Ronhar. Maybe it's later on with Ronhar.
Well, they mentioned it several times. It's like that's how they used to do it. Is the Jedi exclusively were chancellors?
That would be
Rather,
extreme.
chancellors are exclusively Jedi. I should say.
That would be so interesting.
That's just a wild concept. But anyway.
I mean, it does kind of make sense, though. It's like the Jedi want to try to have their cake and eat it, too. They want to either be halfway involved in the Republic. And I think Plagueis brings it up. It's either Plagueis or Palpatine brings it up that, like, the Jedi should have just continued that and just run the Republic, or have gotten themselves out of it entirely. But this, like, will they, won't they? Like, we're going to kind of be involved, but we're going to make our own discretion. I mean, it also ultimately is what leads to their own corruption.
Yeah. You see so many seeds in these chapters of where the Jedi are at and how the Senate is kind of, they've become complacent and kind of hermited. And the Senate has, you know, also kind of lost their way a little bit. Go ahead, Seth.
Well, I mean, it just shows how the Sith were able to overthrow them. It's as you said, they've gotten lazy, they've gotten complacent. Yeah, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, this is the time to strike is now. So
the time is now.
This is a little off topic. How, Grayson, maybe you know, what year does the Living Force take place? The book.
That's like out. It's like literally like a year before the Phantom Menace.
Because what I was thinking of was when they were all together, it's like Mace and Jocasta Nu and all of that stuff. Like rereading that of like how many Jedi were together. That's what I was thinking of, was like that's kind of the same way it'll be for the Living Force, where it's all of those Jedi together at the same time. And if it's around this time as well, I wonder if how much that will play into what we read here. During those times, you know what I mean?
I mean, it'd have to change a little bit because I know the Living Force takes place like on one specific island of like a planet, which is interesting.
Oh yeah.
But it would be, I mean, obviously it's not, the entire book's not going to take place on this island, just like the bulk of it. But I mean, imagine if they just like John Jackson Miller just casually name dropped like, oh, hey, go to Mask, you know?
Yeah.
Like that would be such a, even then, imagine if they dropped not even a Plagueis name, but in the Acolyte, they dropped the name Hey Go Damask or Damask Holdings. Like,
that's what I'm waiting for. Like to see in the background a crate or something that says Damask Holding on it. It'll be the Leo meme instantly, like,
that would be enough for me to be like, oh, like, you know, it doesn't mean that like obviously the entire Plagueis book is canon, but like, hey, we're still acknowledging that this is a crucial part of there, right? And there's enough here that like I'm like, with literally some very minor rewrites, this book could be canon. Like there's really not much holding it back. And so in my head, I'm like, yeah, like obviously there's probably some things that contradict it, but like Sam Witwer says, like it's okay if stories are different. So until something drastically changes and Plagueis is a completely different species or whatever, like, and Damask Holdings doesn't exist, like I'm taking this as it is right now until it changes. Same way you guys view like Gindy's, like where it's like it still sort of kind of fits in there with Clone Wars, even though it kind of doesn't. It's
Grievous's cough will always be from Mace Windu doing that. Like there's never, unless something else happens and it changes, that's always what it's going to be in my head.
That Ventress fight is still cemented where I'm like, yeah, it happened.
Unless
what were you gonna say, Connor? I
don't see, especially with how Filoni has said that he takes things from legends and things that are already out there in like the fan zeitgeist. I don't think that they change, at least like the broad strokes.
Yeah.
I think Plagueis remains a moon for sure. I think that'd be a weird
It's just
thing
a giant.
So,
The pronunciation of Mun is so funny because it's such it's also pronounced moon, and I always just think of just like Plagueis just being like a giant like moon.
From like Majora's Mask, he's just like
yeah, but it's just his face just.
Oh my god!
What's weird?
Anyway, I don't see them changing much.
He's always
in the audiobook. They flip back and forth too with the pronunciation, which is so weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't. I just go Mun and Damask or wait. Like I think Cole and I were talking at one point, and we accidentally called him like Hugo Damask.
Yeah. I think I've called him that a couple times.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much left in this chapter, so I'll go ahead and go to the next summary.
So, do we maybe want to, not to derail too much, but like maybe do a couple at a time because we still got a lot of chapters to go. We're like,
that's fine with me. I can do. We just did 18. No, we did we did 18. So I'll do 19 and 20, maybe 21 as well. Let you guys gauge it.
Yeah.
Chapter 19. The Trade Federation wins the vote with their planets gaining access to the Senate. Palpatine meets with a Celestin representing. This is a good chapter right here. We're about to get into some good stuff. That is representing Silvestri Trace Power, which is kind of connected to some other associations. But Palpatine is abducted by the hater Senator Pax Team, who's just the ultimate op for Palpatine. And he has mostly all the dirt on him and Higo Damask, and plans on killing Palpatine right there in this old warehouse on Coruscant. But Palpatine is rescued by the Enchani Sun Guard. I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, but those are the people from Knights of the Republic 2. And the entire act was actually was kind of orchestrated by Palpatine so that he could discover the location of Pax Team, and that Pax Team could be punished. But there's a catch we'll get to in just a second. Going to chapter 20, Plagueis is at the initiation of Larsh Hill into the Order of the Canted Circle. It's a very interesting lore there that I won't get into. But everyone is quickly betrayed by the initiators in a sudden twist, where discs are flying and people are getting cut up and droids are getting bashed up. That's and it's that. I'll go ahead and say before I get into it, that part in the book, I literally went, whoa, what's happening? Like, I felt like it gave off Red Wedding vibes from Game of Thrones. Where I was like,
it comes in fast.
Yeah. But Palpatine, once he's safe, he gets word from Saint Pestage that the Maladians were hired to make a hit. And Palpatine reaches out in the Force and senses what's happened, that this was actually, that they had been double-crossed by, not double-crossed, but they had been outplayed by the Grand Protectorate. So Plagueis fends off for himself, nearly brought to his last breath when Palpatine and Sate rescue him. We'll end here at the end of chapter 20, where Palpatine, he goes on a single-handed mission to hunt down the Grand Protectorate and murders them all with monstrous force, to say the least. We'll end it right there for those two chapters, chapter 19 and 20. Dude, these chapters are wild.
So when Plagueis goes up against all of the assassins, the way that was described for me, I was visualizing like Force Unleashed level stuff. Because the way that it was talking about what he was doing, it sounded like he was doing like Force Repulse, basically, like sending waves that just eviscerates these assassins, man. I was like, dude, you are not... You're messing with the wrong guy.
That's a great way to describe that, because I felt like... In Force Unleashed, it's clearly just because you're playing a video game and you need to be able to do cool things, but this felt believable. Like you were backed against a wall and he has to do everything he can just to survive. So stop the bleeding and the punctured lungs and the neck. Like, I mean, everything. He is on his very last breath, using every inch of the dark side of the Force to make sure he lives. I'll say it was one of the more creative scenes I've seen using the Force like in Star Wars media, because when you introduce a concept like the Force, all of a sudden you're kind of writing yourself into a corner because it's like, well, now the Jedi could start crushing internal organs with people, but maybe they don't because they're Jedi, you know, and it's all stuff like that. But now, no, that's what's happening. Like Plagueis is just, he's doing everything, pulling out all the stops. And one of the small things that I love, it just the way that it was written is Plagueis tries to summon a blaster to him and he like levitates it and starts to bring it towards him. And one of the, who are the assassins? I forget. What are the
Maladians?
The Maladians, yeah. One of the Maladians like steps in front of it and just like blocks it with their body.
He like shoulder bashes the rifle.
Yeah,
it's
just so I just it just seems so like everybody is just so primal and just thinking like, okay, what can I do off the cuff? You know, to try
I'm viewing this in a very cinematic way as I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh, this would look so good on screen. You know, like this would go down as like. Just
and the way that it
action
ends too is like when Palpatine gets there and he's like, we need to go because the Jedi will have felt this, and Plagueis is still so drunk with the dark side, he's like, let them come.
Yeah,
like, feel this.
I love that.
Yeah,
I will say, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay, who's seen Kingsman?
Yeah,
this scene reminded me of Kingsman. That like the first person shot where he's just going through and just like, all right. The dark side's got me, and now I'm just gonna run through everybody. It does not matter.
It's playing Freebird by Leonard Skinner.
Exactly. I was playing Freebird in my head. This Plagueis is just eviscerating everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could even like use use more Star Wars video game analogies in Survivor when Cal goes dark.
Ooh,
yeah. Like just press R2 and or R3 and L3.
Isn't it like you feel the dark side or something, and then everything goes red around?
I think it says embrace the dark side.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's very cool,
dude. Imagine a Plagueis video game, dude.
That would be so cool, man.
You know what? But I think that's what makes it neat, though. He doesn't do this all the time.
Yeah,
he can't do this all the time. It's just like he is, like as Connor said, he's backed against a corner. He has no other choice.
Yeah, he's not. He's not Maul. He's not like when he fights. It's effective, but it's sparing. You know,
Well, it reminds me. It makes me think of like how much Palpatine wanted to do that when it switches to him going all out on the Grand Protectorate, you know.
Yeah, dude.
And it mentions that scene where where Palpatine passes a mirror and he looks at himself and like his hair is unkept, his eyes are yellow, he's got saliva coming out of his mouth, he looks like a rabid dog. I just thought that was like such a great description of him, man.
It's interesting because in the chapter before, when he is cornered by Pax Team's kind of goons, he's already like Palpatine is already going through his head of like how he's going to take these guys out. Like he's talking about like ripping their throats out or like slashing their throats and everything. Just no lightsaber or anything. And then he doesn't get to do that because he's saved by the Sun Guard. But then after what happens to Plagueis, he gets to just completely let loose on the Grand Protectorate, and it is, dude. I mean. Him burning like Pax Team alive with like the what is it, the curtain or whatever, and he just like he uses the Force to like set it on fire and just watches him burn and roast. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude!
R-rated Star Wars,
dude. He's I'm gonna go through here in a second. Also, like him connecting the dots of like, oh, they'd been outplayed by the Grand Protectorate is really cool because you're really thrust into the position of Palpatine of like going through and like, wait, connecting these dots, and then ultimately being like, oh, they're not on that orbital station, they're here, and the Maladians are gonna kill my master.
Yeah, it's a fun subversion of expectations because when Palpatine's abducted, you're like, he's playing it cool, you know, he's good the whole time because he's like, all right, he's kind of expecting it, but then Plagueis saves him and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Plagueis knew about it, but then Plagueis gets double crossed and
crosser.
I have in my notes
very like this.
Just Mexican standoff. It's very. I wrote down in my notes, this is super random, that the Order of the Canted Circle just gives off huge Illuminati vibes. Yeah. Like, I'm like, is this like the Star Wars Illuminati? Because they're like, just got their, I don't know. I'd never heard of this organization before until this book.
Yeah, and also, I felt a little dumb while I was reading that chapter because it was describing like what that order was. And I was just kind of like, I don't know what it's talking about. Like, it was like,
that was so cool.
There was like people are standing at one end of the circle and people are standing at the other end, but also it's in midair, and I'm like, I don't understand what's happening, but it's interesting.
That was one of my favorite parts. I thought that was so unique. I was like, what a cool idea for a secret society. It was like something that got shifted by an earthquake.
Literally like 10 degrees or something.
Circle. And they're like, that's the name. That's what we're going with. I think that's so cool.
It's
so
I was just sitting there though, like, this is cool, but I don't get it. Like I just it wasn't going through my head there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find some of the passages from when Plagueis is fighting them off, because they're just
when Plagueis is doing that. I think this was one of the chapters that really cemented why he is one of my just kind of new favorite Sith, is because he's such a calculating individual that even during the battle, hearing his monologue is all about kind of the statistics of the battle. So like he's talking about, oh, my second heart has begun a rhythmic type behavior. My other one is in atrial fibrillation. And then when he starts using the Force, he's like, oh, the Melati have immediately switched to tactics against a Force user. You know, that's it. So like he's just thinking about it like that. I just thought it was great.
What that reminded me of is if you've ever seen like Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes, where it's slow
Discombobulate.
I will punch the assailant at 35 degrees, and it's all slow mo. That's what in my head what it was like.
That's Plagueis, man.
Yeah,
I'm gonna read it.
Do an edit where you put Plagueis' face over it. Discombobulate.
Put the other guy with the fedora.
Oh yeah.
Maladians. I'm gonna read like a couple, like skip through here a couple of different passages because I think they're cool to kind of see what you guys are talking about. Having run himself through a similar test, Plagueis knew that he had lost a great deal of blood and that one of his subsidiary hearts was in fibrillation. Sith techniques had helped him perform chemical cardioversions on his other two hearts, but one of them was working so hard to compensate that it too was in danger of becoming arrhythmic. I'm going to go through. Then he dug himself deep into the Force and catapulted himself to his feet. Sorry, my dog. Let's see. My dog is really excited about.
It would have been awesome if you said something else like, "Sorry, that's my roommate."
Others Plagueis felled with his hands by snapping necks and putting his fists through armored torsos. Like what? Oh my gosh! See, spreading his arms wide, he clapped his hands together, turning every loose object into the vicinity into a deadly projectile. Like it just stuff like that. Like. It's so cool. Like, and then his heart fails, and oh my gosh, it's great. It's a great chapter.
Good stuff.
This is probably my favorite section in the whole book, is that plot twist where, like, as soon as it hit this point, like that was where I was like, yep, this book we're full force. That was the meme that you presented, Will, where it's just like I was in.
Yeah,
you know.
Like, all right, well, we're getting into it now.
I also. Not Plagueis, Palpatine, the visual of him like being on the building and then like using the Force to like jump down, go into the vents, and then make his way through and just clear out level by level by level while they're completely off their guard is just
super Batman of him.
Yeah. Very Batman, very hallway scene from like Daredevil and stuff, but just
That's so weird. I pictured anime for some reason. Like, and I don't watch anime, but I pictured like, you know, when like a character with a trench coat will jump and you see like,
I was thinking the same
that's all
thing.
I pictured.
I was thinking
I can see that.
Like perched. I was thinking him like perched on a railing, and when he jumps, it's just kind of silent. Like you just see like his silhouette fall.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was making sure that he was going as fast as he could because he knew that there were cameras there. So even when they looked at the camera, like you just kind of see like a blur, and then suddenly those like two Dougs are just dead.
Yeah.
Dude,
Wow,
I'm
so cool.
I'm gonna read this one section that I had highlighted from Palpatine killing these people, and then I'll go on to the next chapters. I've got snarling like a beast, he whirled through a circle, ridding 3 guards of their heads and cutting a 4th in half at the waist. The blade impaled a guard who had flattened himself to the floor in abject terror, then went straight into the shrieking mouth of the last of them. Just like it's like this is horror level slasher stuff right here.
Yeah,
You're like,
It reminds me of when he does that Sith screech and he does like the, the 640 turn. Yep. And then he lands and he just starts going into people. That it's like, that's just like when he goes, like, lets the dark side take him. That's what he does.
Yeah.
It's just boom, just barreling at you like a torpedo.
Yeah, it says Pax team. It says from the head of the table, Pax team gawked at him as if he might be a creature escaped from his most horrifying nightmare. Really cool stuff.
Good stuff.
Grayson, before we move on to the next chapters, I do think it's fun in 21 how Plagueis or Palpatine starts to realize Plagueis's cloning plans. I really enjoyed that, and him like going over the holocrons and all of that stuff, and it being like, oh, everything he's wanted this entire time in terms of knowledge and everything that Plagueis would not give him, he's finally got access to with 114D there. And we do get a cool nod to Revan at that chapter as well. Your thoughts betray you. Do you think that Malik's powers were weakened by Revan's saber? By being encrusted in orbalisks? Do you think that Gravid's young apprentice was hindered by the prosthesis she was forced to wear? Like, he's just quoting so much other stuff that's going on. I thought that was really
it basically just gets it's the checklist of all the Sith Lords that have been gone through a lot of physical impairment, and to be like, this ain't nothing, man. This is just still
it's one of my favorite like isms of Plagueis's teachings, because whenever he's scolding Palpatine, he's basically just hitting him with a history book.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to
do that. Well, what about this?
I'll go ahead and I'll do the chapter summary for 21, because then we're going to get to the big time jump for part 3, which is kind of the bulk of everything. But yeah, chapter 21, the investigation of both incidents, both with the Grand Protectorate and the Order, yield no results, and Palpatine is invited to Abora on Moonalist by Plagueis, where he enlightens him on the experiments he has been performing, where he has actually successfully impregnated some of the creatures with only the Force. And then an injured Plagueis reveals he is moving all of his work to his castle on Sojourn, and Palpatine reveals Maul to his master and is granted permission for him to be trained as an assassin.
There's another wild chapter.
Insane cool stuff in this chapter.
Like some good, like little lore bits.
It kind of feels like this is the point where, like, okay, Palpatine has served me well as an apprentice. Like, I'm going to let him in on all of this stuff now.
Yeah. It's literally that. I mean, he gets brought into the fold on this one.
I do think it's interesting, though, how, like, at the one point when Palpatine, like 114D, is, like, explaining all of this to him, and he's like, these are the Magister's most recent pregnancies. And he's like, just like, what are you talking about?
What was he doing?
Pregnancies, Masters. Sith Lords, he's just confused about everything. But yeah, where? Or at the one point where he's like, that is venomous, Plagueis said in a voice that wasn't entirely his. Stuff like that. I just thought was this chapter is one of my favorites in the book, especially after going through it. Like, I think one of my favorite things in Star Wars, and it's, I mean, obviously you could look at the Luke, I am your father thing as such like a big part of it. But when information is revealed to the other characters in Star Wars, that makes Star Wars so much more fun, is because of like all of everything that's going on behind the scenes. And then now everybody is in on the same info. I think that's when Star Wars is at its best. There's so much buildup, and then once everybody has all of the info at the same time, it's like everybody's been caught up. Now, what are you going to do with that info? That I think is truly captivating with like this, with Palpatine now knowing, because obviously you know that Palpatine uses this for even later on, having that like cloning facility and doing all of that. It's the same thing as what we're going to end up seeing in Bad Batch season 3 with all of that and everything with Snoke, and obviously everything in the sequels later on. It's just very cool how you can draw that through line of Palpatine realizing, oh wait, I could do this, and then performing that plan over the entirety of the Skywalker saga. It's just cool to see that final moment.
I like the idea that, like, you know, if we're going to connect this into canon, that because Palpatine kills Plagueis, he never can quite recreate what Plagueis did. You know, like he's constantly scrambling, and it was Plagueis that was Plagueis's ideology, his commitment to the dark side of the Force, and all of its facets allowed him to be able to do this. And I really like this line right here, which is basically the entire through line for the rest of the book in terms of what happens with Plagueis and his efforts. But Plagueis says this. As we attempt to wrest the powers of life and death from the Force, as we seek to tip the balance, the Force resists our efforts. Action and reaction, Sidious, something akin to the laws of thermodynamics. And we'll see that later on in some of the other chapters with some of his experiments and stuff. But I like that it's, Plagueis got a little bit far with it, but maybe it's the Force being like really pushing back on Palpatine of like, once we get to the sequel era, and I know we've mentioned it a lot, but it's kind of hard not to because it's so Palpatine oriented, of him trying to kind of recreate those Plagueis experiments and never quite succeeding, and whether it's maybe to his own power or because of the Force pushing back. Well,
I think that's one of the ultimate problems of the Sith is like, when do you betray your master? Because if you do it too early, all of the knowledge have not been imparted onto you. And that's it. Then that's all lost.
If you wait too long, your chance.
You know what?
Away.
This chapter, while you were talking, Will, it made me think that this is almost like if Palpatine was a Jedi, this is like the Sith equivalent of him getting knighted to knighthood. Of like he was a Padawan before this, and now it's like, all right, you're my knight now, And then obviously when he kills Plagueis, that's when he's like, I'm a master now.
It's just Plagueis is just like, behold my stuff. Like he's just showing him all the and he's like, oh, and this is my buddy Venomous, and he just like knocks on the back to Tank, and Venomous is like, it's been, dude, I honestly got to a point where I was feeling really bad for Venomous. Like he was in that tank being essentially tortured for like basically 50 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Hey, it happens,
rough, bro.
So I got
Sith happens, man.
Yeah.
There it is.
Go ahead, Connor. Or Seth.
You can go first.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Like what they're doing to Venomous, though, like they're killing him and bringing him back, right?
That's that later. Point?
That's later. Never mind then.
Yeah.
We'll get to it later, but
sorry, my bad. Sorry, I'll shut up.
That part was really cool, though. Not gonna lie. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So, it's into more necromancy stuff.
This part I thought was. I'm going to read this passage and then talk about like this is one of my favorite aspects of the book. So this is when Sidious like sees Plagueis for the first time after he started the healing process. He's got the breathing apparatus. He like limps.
How you looked at the beginning. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He says,
exactly like that, guys.
And he says,
my mind's eye.
And he says, he says, your thoughts betray you, Plagueis said. Do you think that Malik's powers were weakened by Revan's lightsaber, Bane by being encrusted in obelisks? Do you think Gravid's young apprentice was hindered by the prosthesis she was forced to wear after fighting him? No, master. Soon I will be stronger than you can possibly imagine. Plagueis forced himself to swallow, then said, come, we have much to discuss. And there's two aspects to this. The first, I like the thought that the cybernetics don't weaken you, which is something that ultimately, it's a through line to Vader, right? Like he's not weakened by that either. But Palpatine does look less upon Vader for being a cyborg, essentially. But
it is but a flesh wound.
The line I like better than that, though, is soon I will be stronger than you can possibly imagine, because obviously this is exactly the mirror to Ben's line, but they come in exactly opposite contexts.
Correct.
Like
well, even like your thoughts betray you is a parallel to what Luke.
Yeah, exactly. I know. And it's so cool because Obi-Wan says the line when he's about to be cut down and become one with the Force. He's about to leave the mortal coil and become one with the Force because he's not tied to the mortal plane. It's not about that for the Jedi. It's about selflessness. But Plagueis is talking about like, no, I'm working on controlling life itself, and that will make me more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And like, it's this line, this like one central line right here that shows the absolute dichotomy between the Sith and the Jedi that I think is so well illustrated. And Revenge of the Sith does this really well too. Like Palpatine says, like to Anakin when he's about to execute Dooku, like he's too dangerous to be left alive. And then Mace says the same thing, and it shows how they're two sides of the same coin, you know. And it's like, So I loved it. I love that line. It's probably one of my favorite moments from the book.
Somebody say the thing. Somebody say the thing. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
It rhymes.
There it is.
I think it's also interesting how when he says, soon I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine, that line is immediately followed by it saying that Plagueis forces himself to swallow. So like, so like, I guess from Palpatine's perspective, he's like, soon I'll become...
Well, that's a great point, Cole, is that it's a great point. It's like he's saying that line while trying to force himself to remain alive. Like it's like his body is even rejecting the statement
concept of it.
Which again goes to the arrogance we were talking about earlier about the dark side. You know, about he's always talking about how it's the dark side willed this. It's like, well, no, the force is a little bigger than you, buddy. You know, it's doing more than just things that you want it to do, which is ultimately the plight of the Sith, is to control the force.
Right, and going right off of your point of Plagueis and Obi-Wan is that, you know, when Plagueis is saying that it is in resistance to death, but when Obi-Wan says it is in acceptance.
Yes, you just said in like 5 words what I took me 2 minutes to say. Yeah, exactly.
Selfishness, selflessness.
Yeah.
Cole is the ultimate mic dropper, bro. Like it's
I know I break so many.
Dude, that's my entire existence. I'll spend like a half hour saying something, but then somebody will immediately like, I'm like, that was way more eloquent than what I would have said. But yep, that's exactly it.
It's okay. We gotta. That's the whole point. We're breaking it down together. Yeah, I've got a couple lines here. There's one though that I'm gonna say that I loved the wording of this. I just thought it was, again, it's just Plagueis dropping bars as he does. Where he says, "For now, Sidious, know that you are the blade we will drive through the heart of the Senate, the Republic, and the Jedi Order, and I, your guide to reshaping the galaxy. Together, we are the newborn stars that complete the Sith constellation."
That's such a cool line.
So good, dude.
So good.
James Luceno, you're cooking, bro.
So here's another one that's really good. Is again Plagueis talking to Palpatine. Because the Jedi have lost the allegiance to the Force. Yes, their ability to draw from the Force continues, but their ability to use the Force has diminished. Which he's correct about that. It kind of goes to this like they've almost got it. You know, he's almost got the whole idea about what's going on with the arrogance about understanding the Force. Because even Mace Windu, he says, is it Mace Windu? He says the exact same thing.
Yeah.
The Jedi even recognize this in the prequels, that their ability to use the Force has diminished, but they can't let the public know about it.
It just makes me think of that Robot Chicken skit where Jarl Poof is like, who can't use the Force? I can still use the Force.
Oh man, I forgot. I was supposed to rewatch a lot of that stuff, but I read this instead, and I was like, the other day I was gonna rewatch a ton of the Robot Chicken stuff. That stuff is like we argue about what's canon and what's not. In my head, a lot of that stuff is canon. Of like those conversations of like, oh yeah, this happens, but then Mace Windu and this guy are talking, and they go down the escalator. It's like that kind of stuff is always canon in my head.
Cole put me on so many of the Robot Chicken stuff, and I'm so grateful for it.
I tried to order Mon Calamari pizza, but Mon Calamari are people, and I did not know that.
And you know what's so funny about you saying that? A little tidbit, guys, for the intro skit. In the past week, I was talking to both Cole and Connor about incorporating myself into the skit, and unfortunately it did not happen. I did not write it in time, but I thought of a joke that basically what was going to happen. This is here's behind the archives, I guess, where it was going to smash cut. It was going to cut to black, and then it was going to fade into the opera. But instead of it being the opera, it was going to be me doing stand-up comedy. And I thought about doing like a thing of being like, and I told the waitress asked me, "What do you want the Mon Calamari?" And I said, "Aren't those people?" And that's what I wanted to say. But I also told Connor and I told the Gungan, "Why the long face?" Or I should have said Kiadi Mundi, but that would have been funny. Anyway, yeah, more inspiration, I guess, for maybe the next short. We'll see.
Ooh, more?
I'm retiring
I
from.
was gonna say we
guys.
talked about that.
No!
Is that happening? Is that now a thing? There's gonna be skits for everything.
I think we should make it, and maybe the comments can say otherwise, but I think it should be at the end of every book, basically. Like we should make it the grand send off, because also you guys are doing a lot of your stuff, bro. It's got to be Connor. Shave his head.
There ain't no way.
only Seth can be Quinlan Voth, bro. He's got the hair.
I see.
Oh yeah.
He's got to go. Hey, Obi-Wan.
Will got some nice locks as well.
That's true. Will is Quinlan Voth.
Seth's got it. Seth's got it.
Ridiculous.
Connor's got to put on that same bald cap, but just repaint it slightly brighter.
Oh my god!
Ventress is just Plagueis with lipstick. That's the only difference.
It's just hot Plagueis.
I was gonna say it's a recurring gag that Plagueis did survive, and he just pretended to be Ventress the entire time.
Were we talking about this book? Isn't that what we were talking about?
Sorry.
Yeah,
we're just talking about how that's the end of the book. We haven't got to it. He turns
right
into.
Here in the epilogue, it says, and then I took on the moniker Asajj Ventress. My apprentice was none the wiser.
All right. Well, now we're gonna hop into part 3, which is the final act of the book. This is set in 34 to 32 BBY. It's called Mastery. Phantom Menace. I will say some of the freaking. I'm sorry. All right. Chapter 22. Palpatine is in an emergency Senate meeting. It's really boring, held by Finis Valorum, who's really boring. And the Outer Rim is going buck wild out there. And so Valorum pitches the idea of using a paramilitary force to deal with the pirates and other lawless attacks. But most desire a proper army to protect the Republic planets, even though that goes against some stupid legislate thing. Taxation on free trade zones is also brought up by Valorum, but Valorum's perception is dwindling in the eyes of the Senate, just as Plagueis and Palpatine planned, and he is failing as a chancellor. Palpatine holds a dinner party at his new apartment, which is at the very end of this is really good, where he discusses allies, enemies, decision-making, and the darkness encroaching on the Jedi and Republic with the Chancellor Valorum. It's really good stuff. The very end of this, we'll get into it. I'm going to go and mention chapter 23 as well. Plagueis and Sidious on Sojourn watch a recording of Maul, and Plagueis is he's become a lot more adept with his kind of mechanical form, with a respirator and other new additions. But he admires Maul's skill as an assassin. And I do want to mention before we go to part 3, that Plagueis fully tells Palpatine, train him as an assassin, but never let him know about me. Like, make him think he is the apprentice in this master dynamic. So it's interesting to know that Maul never knew that Plagueis was actually there, which is just really cool.
I was not privy to my master's plan.
It used to be, I'll get into it. It used to be a complaint for me, and now I absolutely love it. I love the idea of that Maul was a pawn the entire time.
Dooku's better.
I don't know. I will say it didn't convince me. I was hoping it did, but it did not.
Really? Well, I'm going to convince you. Anyway, so the gatherings on Sojourn have ceased, and Plagueis has become something of a recluse. They talk about, Plagueis and Palpatine talk about the Yanshori attacks, where they've been kind of orchestrating these attacks on the Outer Rim. I don't think they ever say that they're clones. I think it's just Yanshori that they've facilitated. Or are they actually clones? I don't think they're clones. I think the clones didn't work, right?
I think they ditched the idea of cloning Yanshori.
Yeah, I think they just facilitated these attacks. And they're talking about the Trade Federation, Naboo, and all of that stuff. Should I keep going, or should I do another recap?
Do another recap. That way we'll talk about it all at once.
Chapter.
Okay. This next chapter is big chapter. So bear with me here. Palpatine meets with Ars Varuna, who is now the king, with a demonstration of the N1 starfighters. And Varuna states that he plans on ending the partnership with the Trade Federation as they no longer need them, and Naboo has come very far. Palpatine warns that he should be careful as the Senate likely will approve arming the Trade Federation ships in lieu of the Yunchori attacks and other rampant piracy. Doing so, Valorum hopes they will allow taxation in the free trade zones. Okay, the free trade zones. Palpatine asks remix. Palpatine asks that Varuna side with the Trade Federation against the taxation, and if he does, Hago Damask can leverage a new renegotiated deal with them. Varuna does not like Damask any longer and is hesitant, but takes Palpatine's advice into account. Plagueis on Sojourn repeats to himself that time is short, which is the section that Connor and I really loved. He reveals that 10 years ago, him and Palpatine made a breakthrough and were able to revive Venomous. Plagueis also begins to heal himself using the dark side. Growing much more drunk on power, he attempts to reach out in the Force to create a forceful being, but the creatures were plagued. His experiments were plagued with disease and all were killed. But he believes he's still on the cusp of his goals. And then Palpatine learns from Maul that the secret ambush with the Yunchori at the temple failed. And Palpatine contacts Newt Gunray as Darth Sidious. The first time he is making himself public as Darth Sidious to someone beyond just the master and apprentice relationship. And he arranges to be partners and assist the Viceroy into a promotion at the head of the Trade Federation. He tells Maul to become familiar with the planet Dorvala and to leverage Gunray. So yeah, a lot of stuff in those 3 chapters right there. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah. Do you think Palpatine put on his hood and then looked in the mirror and was like, "This is it. This is."
I mean, that basically is what he did, though. He literally was like nervous. He was like, "Do I look good? Do I look good?" And it wasn't in like
he tells Maul, he's like, "Hey, stand back there.
Yeah,
I'll let you know my hype."
He's
man.
like,
"Yep."
It's just like I need your confidence right now, bro.
I'm imagining the scene from the Phantom Menace, but before that, he's like, "All right, in just a second, I'm going to introduce you. You need to cross your arms and just look real cool, okay?"
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally the setup. I mean, that's why they did it that way. Clearly, no, there's a lot of good stuff in here. I'll wait because the thing I want to talk about is mainly chapter 24. So I'll wait.
Is that the chapter? What did I just? Oh no, that is in this one. I mean, if you want to go and talk about it, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, I'll just get right into it.
Yeah, let's talk about that section because it's so good.
So there's the, when they tried to reach out into the Force and create something new, but then they thought that they failed. Mm-hmm. Clearly, because this happened 10 years before, I think that they were successful.
You think they created Anakin?
Yeah, I think it's very.
Yeah,
they even later on in the book
they imply that.
Yeah, Palpatine tries to he does the math.
I know. I think what happened is they don't create Anakin. They try to do that, and then the Force. I mean, the chapter is literally called "The Force Fights Back" or "Strikes Back."
Yeah.
So
my favorite movie,
Force Strikes Back.
See, I had always kind of heard about that happening, but when it says that all of those creatures died from horrible sicknesses, in that moment, I was like, well, what if they kind of sapped the life essence from those creatures and maybe other ones and created Anakin out of that? And instead of creating something out of nothing,
Anakin is the product of a bunch of diseased creatures.
The way I like to think about it is like Plagueis and Palpatine were catalysts in a chemical reaction, essentially. They didn't necessarily do it. They didn't know what they were doing and they thought that they failed, but they caused chain reaction that they couldn't stop. And they wouldn't know the outcome for another 10 years. So that part was cool. But the main thing I wanted to mention, which this may be my favorite part of the book.
It's so good.
You know what I'm about to mention, Grayson?
Oh yeah.
So this is Plagueis. He says, he recalled a stellar eclipse he had witnessed on a long-forgotten world whose single moon was of perfect size and distance to blot out the light of a system's primary. The result hadn't been total darkness, but illumination of a different sort, single and diffuse, that had confused the birds and permitted the stars to be seen in what would have been broad daylight. Even totally blocked, the primary had shone from behind the satellite's disk, and when the moon moved on, there had been a moment of light almost too intense to bear. And this metaphor is such a I just love it. I think it's
it's so good,
so unique. The metaphor of they're succeeding in getting the dark side to blot out the light, and now Plagueis is thinking is like, but when the Force strikes back, it's going to strike back in a way that is so blinding that there is a chance that it's going to just completely uncover all of the darkness that we're building. Like, yes, we're succeeding right now in blocking out the light, but I think it's neat that like Luceno isn't doing this for us, the audience. He's like, Plagueis is thinking about this.
Yeah.
So Plagueis is self-aware enough to know we're doing all of this work, but there is a good chance that what we're doing it could be undone. And he even later, when Anakin is discovered, I think inadvertently thinks about this. The book doesn't directly tell you that, but I think you can infer that he's like, this is that moment where we have the eclipse, but the sun is about to shine through. And in my, just Star Wars mind here, I think that's Luke. Luke is that. Luke is the moment. It's the Return of the Jedi moment.
It's about to ask you guys.
Clever.
Is when stuff like this is talked about. Is it Anakin or is it Luke? And for me, I always lean towards Luke being this kind of the guy who brings the light back. Obviously, Anakin,
I think it's both.
Yeah,
I think it's both. I think it's. I mean, it's Luke's. The Force uses. Yeah, Luke's actions allow Anakin to come back to the light side, and both of them together, the light is so blinding that not even Palpatine can see it, right? Yeah. And that's, in my eyes, and I know we're getting sequel stuff here, but it's the same thing as that darkness comes back. Palpatine starts to mess with stuff. He's trying to, bring himself back. Rey and Ben, that, in my mind, that's the Force being
one of
like...
the coolest parts. That's one of my favorite quotes from the sequels is, darkness rises in the light to meet it. I mean, it's... I like that concept a lot, but it's Luke.
It's this constant. We love the Rise of Skywalker. No, it's funny how you guys are like, that happened to us on one episode as well, where we were like constantly mentioning Rise of Skywalker throughout the whole episode, and we were just like talking about things that we enjoyed about it. And we were like, is this just becoming a Rise of Skywalker episode? Because it just has so many.
It's whatever. Every time I pull stuff from that movie, I'm like, it's fun.
Okay. Well, it's just it has some of the coolest concepts, and it's still those concepts. It's why I'm always a diehard believer in that Ben should always have come back to the light side, because I hate the idea of him staying in the dark side and dying. I think that's such a weird whatever. But that's it. That lines up perfectly with the analogy. And when I read it for the first time, and I went, that was random, and then I was like, wait. I reread it again, and I went, oh wow, like that's even Plagueis is feeling that doubt there, feeling like it's a really good, I mean, even real life example, because like if you are to look at an eclipse, like once it happens, it's like, oh wow, that's so cool, but then as soon as it starts to peak back again, the light is so concentrated, it can make you blind. Like it literally will blind a person. And so I think
there's a lot of things with that. It's like your eyes are dilated for the darkness at that point. If you get used to it, you become complicit with it. And then, oh my goodness, there it is. It's blinding once again. And I think it's really cool to think about that, it is Luke. Like to me, that moment when the moon finally goes away is Luke throwing away his lightsaber. And I think that's awesome. It's a really cool thing.
I would even argue it's both the twins. I think both Luke and Leia are instrument. I mean, obviously what happens on the Death Star, but without Leia as well, the rebellion would not have become what it was.
Yes, but I mean, when you're talking about like chosen ones in the Force and stuff like that, don't get me wrong, I am a big Leia fan, but it's Luke and Vader that is ultimately that moment. And I mean, Leia has a part
Connor
to play
hates Leia.
I love Leia. I love Leia. I will say,
check out our top 10 episode.
As a brief aside, she's in my top 10.
I know I'm giving you a hard time.
As just it does annoy me though, like this retroactive, like Yoda would have rather trained her. I'm like, would he though? Like, why? She was raised as a politician. That was her part to play, and she was very instrumental in that way. Luke was the Jedi side of it.
I think the only reason why Yoda would have wanted to train Leia is because Luke reminds him too much of Anakin, and he doesn't want another Anakin. Yeah.
Well, but you know what's funny though is like if you read some of the other supplemental materials, is like Luke is actually more like Padme, and Leia is more like Anakin.
Yeah. It is a very interesting inverse. I think it's because like immediately though he thinks, oh, it's a son. Anakin was like, you know, the chosen one. I get it. I think Yoda in that moment was taking it way too much at face value. But it's
like another one of those things that Will loves that I'm tearing down.
I will say in Empire Strikes Back when Luke leaves and there is another.
Yeah.
The one thing that bothers me so much about that is that they're so mad at Luke for leaving. Like, Luke, you're the only one who can do this. If you leave, there is no hope. And then as soon as he dips, Obi-Wan's like, well, I guess you're right. There is no hope. And he's like, no, we got Leia. So, like, why was he lying to Luke the entire time about that?
It's because they didn't know Leia was going to be his sibling.
Here's a big thing about that, okay? I know that retroactively he is probably talking about Leia, but at the filming of Empire Strikes Back, that twist was not written yet. I think that was intended to be about Vader. I think that was always intended to be about Anakin because he gets flushed with red light when he says there is another. Because then, I mean, even think about how the movie is written. What's the twist you find out about Empire? Like I am your father. So when he says, you know, hey, the boy is lost, like there is no hope. And Yoda's like, hey, we still have Anakin though. He could not have been. I know retroactively we can look at it and say it's Leia, but as far as the writing of that movie, it's impossible.
I always assumed, because I mean, from what I understand, Leia, like there was always planned that Luke was going to have a sister, it just wasn't Leia, and then they decided to make it Leia.
I do not believe that is true. I think
from what I heard,
that he had that planned from the beginning, but that is not the case.
Really, I remember like hearing a few years back. I remember playing Battlefront 2015, and I remember I had read that there was actually going to be a character similar to Rey that was going to be and it wasn't going to be called Rey or anything, but I'm talking like there was a lot of weird similar parallels there, that there was going to be this other Skywalker but then they didn't have
named Kira, where they got Kira from.
No, maybe the original Episode 7 concept for Rey.
That's what it is.
Yeah. But then basically they were like, they didn't have the they couldn't figure out how to put it in the plot. So that Lucas was like, well, what if we made it Leia? So you're like, I don't know where that came from, but I remember that very vividly. We'll have to do some fact checking on that. Back to Plagueis.
I'd be curious about that. But I do know that Leia was not in the cards for being related, at least as far as Empire Strikes Back was concerned. I mean, Anakin and Vader weren't even the same guy when A New Hope was written. So
that's what I always say is people are like, oh man, George, like he had it all planned out.
And hey, that's not a knock against George. I think creative writing like that,
working through the process.
Lucas is like Plagueis. He's an opportunist.
Yeah, I mean, this book is doing that too. It's like it's taking all of this written material and it's sort of making it all work in ways that maybe it didn't always work in that way. You know, I think it's
the same way the Clone Wars did it. It was like they were taking it. That in my mind, that's kind of the legacy of Star Wars in a weird way, where it's like, oh, we've got these beats, and now like. Not that you have to fill in the gaps, but like you're like, oh, what can we kind of fit in there to? And when you read stuff like this, when you watch stuff like this, it gives you a really newfound appreciation, especially for the Phantom Menace, which we're gonna get kind of into those last chapters here soon. But of like, oh wow, like, and obviously George Lucas did not have that planned, you know. But it's cool to go back and be like, oh man, like it gives you a new lens to watch Phantom Menace and be like, oh, this is.
It does, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
I gotta go back and look at the summary real quick because I know we jumped to that really good like foreshadowing piece. But is there anything else we want to talk about in this chapter or these chapters?
I was just looking this up to clarify.
So they're bringing Venomous back at this point, right?
Yes, this is the moment where they actually let it die.
Okay.
They say that it was
back, right?
Yeah.
They say that it has been. It is so 20 years has passed. This was 10 years ago that they had brought him back.
So this is what I think Palpatine's doing to Anakin on the hill after Obi-Wan leaves him. Palpatine's keeping him alive. Like, you know, that they all like he puts his hand on Anakin's forehead. I think he's keeping him alive long enough for the medical capsule. That it's like you know, because he's like, I can't create life. You know what I mean? I don't know that secret.
Preserve
yet, but
it.
I can at least do this. I can keep you on this plane of existence until technology can take you the rest of the way. That's just my. There you go. There's some Seth headcanon for you.
Confirmed.
I think that's what he's doing.
I'm down.
I think it's kind of similar to Plagueis as well, where like, you know, Anakin is using every last fiber in his being of the Force to keep himself alive. But I mean, even we saw with Plagueis, like he was going to fail unless Palpatine shows up. It's the same thing here, where Anakin was going to die if Palpatine didn't show up.
Yeah.
I like that theory. Huh? That's cool.
Just a thought.
It was a good thought, Seth.
Just the thoughts with Seth from Beyond the Dune Sea.
Great thought.
What other thoughts are you thinking, Seth?
Yeah,
we can keep going.
Take those thoughts.
We keep moving. We can keep moving on through
moving.
it. Let's go. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go. I guess I'll go ahead and get into the, and we can always come back if we need to. But
what was something you wanted to talk about?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no. I mean, I want to talk about that one passage. We still got like 5-6 more chapters left or something, but I'm gonna cover the next couple. This one was a pretty cool one that I really liked. I've got a lot to talk about this one. Chapter 25. Jabba the Hutt visits Plagueis on Sojourn. Jabba Ezra Bridger.
This is wild. Yeah.
A preconceived Ezra Bridger shows up to Sojourn.
Oh my gosh.
Jabba the Hutt, baby.
And he tells him that he's basically planning on taking Tatooine fully from Gardulla, even though it hasn't happened yet. And I really like the acknowledgement of the different Hutt clans, because Jabba is Jabba Deselagic Tiur. He's from that's his thing, and then Gardulla is from another one of the clans. But in exchange for Plagueis to stop funding for her, Jabba tells Plagueis that basically gives information, which I want to get into this in a second because it's really cool. Jabba tells Plagueis that the cult assassins, the Bando Gora, are being led by a new human female, Komari Vosa, who was Dooku's former Padawan.
It's the one Jango Fett has to kill, right?
Jango Fett in the Bounty Hunter video game, baby.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. When that happened, I read that and I went, from Jango Fett?
Yeah. And that's the job that gets him the clones, right? Or gets him killing her is what gets him then is like, oh, you're gonna be the
and we get to the end of the book, I'll go ahead and say it, like Palpatine gives that information to Dooku, and Dooku's like, all right. Oh, you could use that. Yeah. It's still it gets interesting because I'm like, I would love for the Komari Vosa is very similar to Ventress in that game, where she literally is just human Ventress. Anyway, on Coruscant, Dooku reveals to Palpatine that he is considering leaving the Order. They're getting a rekindled kind of connection. And yo, Star Wars theory in the chat.
What up there? Where's the blue guy?
Hey yo.
Masameda? The most recent straw for Dooku was that the Jedi wrongly dispatched Jedi to a planet called Baltazar to fend off against the Bando Gora, and now they are all believed to be dead, but they're not sending anybody to go and rescue them. So Dooku's getting frustrated with the Jedi's narrow-minded and lazy ways, as we already talked about, and he agrees to leave the Order if another Jedi dies because of it. And I do think at this point, I'd have to go check here in just a second, but I do think he knows that Komari was part of those Jedi. But he doesn't know her fate yet. And I don't even think Palpatine knows who Komari Vosa is at this point. But anyway, Palpatine goes to meet with some familiar faces from the deleted scenes of Attack of the Clones, Rui and Jabal Naberi of the refugee relief movement on Coruscant. Padme's parents, guys. He presents.
I knew that. I was.
No, it's for the audience. I'm not diminishing your fandom, guys. He presents and supports the idea of pushing their daughter, who is very young, like 13 or 14 at this point, to run against King Varuna and become the new queen of Naboo. Maybe do we just want to? I mean, I can keep going, but do you want to just talk about this for a second, or?
Literally the only thing I can think of is just when Rui like turns around, he's like Palpatine, and like kind of like claps him on the shoulder.
They're like friends.
I remember like while I was reading that, I'm like, man, imagine like just being that guy that said, oh yeah, I gave Palpatine a hug once. Like, I don't know, that just feels like really weird to say and to think. Like,
Yeah.
just imagine just feeling pierced by insane dark side energy. You just don't even know what just happened. Or Palpatine letting someone hug him and in his mind going, I hate this. Don't touch me. You know?
I hate you. I'm gonna kill you.
I hate you.
It's also just insane to think about that Palpatine sets up a child to be queen just to further his own political.
Yeah.
Yes. A 13-year-old. Like, yeah. Freaking
Like,
crazy.
there's a lot of
Literally pulls all the strings.
Yeah,
It's-
Puppet Master, man.
It just I love seeing it, man. I love seeing him use children.
You love to see it.
Okay, so the other thing I enjoyed about this chapter,
Thank you, Connor.
was no, I thought that this is where we hear about the chosen one, right? Because prophecy for the first time. I'm trying to find. I must not have earmarked it.
I'm gonna go to chapter 25. Do we?
Yeah, let's say that's what we're on, right? Chapter 25.
Chapter 25. Yes. There's
So I thought this is where he's talking to Dooku about it, and Dooku's.
They think they.
Yeah, he does. They do talk about
they found him. They just are talking about the prophecy.
Gotcha. Oh, because the Jedi, like, isn't Qui-Gon kind of like looking for it? Or no?
He's not. They're not actively. Well,
Yeah.
they're all kind of actively searching for it because
Yeah.
that's like their way to get out of the coming darkness because they all sense it.
Yeah.
I guess that's all there is to say about it, really. But
I'm trying to find it real quick. Oh, they talk about a little bit about Qui-Gon, and he has become solitary and a secretive rogue.
Here it is. I found it. If you, unless you found it.
No, go ahead.
They await the coming of a prophesized redeemer who will bring balance to the Force and restore order. And Palpatine has a really interesting response. A redeemer. Palpatine stared at him in authentic surprise. So, like, he never considered, and he even says this, I never considered the Force needed to be balanced.
Mm-hmm. It says the Order interprets the prophecy to mean that the dark tide needs to be stemmed.
Yeah. But I think it's fascinating that they use the word redeemer. It's a very religious word.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we all
that echoes very well what Palpatine and Dooku's conversation is later on when they're talking about Qui-Gon finding Anakin and Qui-Gon obviously being. I think Dooku refer to him as like him being so encapsulated with he's almost blinded by the chosen one prophecy. Yeah. I thought that was very interesting too of Dooku because you like in Tales of the Jedi, Dooku speaks so highly of Qui-Gon at all times, and then for this conversation to happen and Qui-Gon, he'd be like, "Yeah, that's Qui-Gon. He's always talking about that chosen one prophecy."
Qui-Gon and but Qui-Gons be bygones. You know what I'm saying?
Qui-Gon over here, Qui-Gon
over
there.
I was very much hoping that layup would dunk by you, Seth. On the he's Qui-Gon and all over the place.
I think that this is also like a line that is the Jedi version of them being arrogant in the Force, the same way that Plagueis is. Like, listen to that language, like a redeemer who will bring balance to the Force and restore order. Like they're speaking about it just like the Jedi do in the prequels, that bringing balance to the Force is about destroying the Sith and bringing the Jedi order to fruition and bringing it back to prominence.
Yeah.
And it's a very arrogant way to look at it. It's not what happens.
Balance is never about both sides. It's always just eradicating the other.
Yeah, exactly. And they're both arrogant in that way. When balance is a lot more than that, and the Force is more than that, and it's proven.
Yeah, it's interesting because people to this day will still refer to Palpatine being defeated at the end of Return of the Jedi as bringing balance back to the Force. You know, and it's like, well, what does that like define bringing balance? Because we don't even really know yet. Like, well,
I kind of subscribe to this. I think I brought it up last stream. Thor Skywalker is a YouTuber who has mentioned like balance is the Force and the dark side is sort of a perversion of it. And in perfect balance, the dark side isn't really a thing, but neither is an extreme version of the light either.
Yeah.
The light is more, when you talk about the light side, it's more of a reactionary of the dark side. And if the dark side is kind of eradicated in a way, I guess, this perversion of the Force. Yeah. Balance is just the Force, is his point. And I kind of agree with that. So defeating Sidious at the end of Return of the Jedi does create balance. And Luke even mentions this, that for a time there was balance after the defeat of Palpatine. And then once he started taking apprentices, then the balance was broken.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
I think that's, I kind of agree with that once you start getting dogmatic in either way, then the balance is broken.
Darkness rises, light to meet it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the light rises and the darkness meets it.
Yeah. There has to
because
be repercussions.
Yeah. Because I think that how the light can become complacent is what you see with the Jedi and up to the prequel era and in this book. That's how the light side becomes bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about for a second when you were all like, he was so surprised at the term a redeemer.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, what is a redeemer? It's something good. It's something pure. Sidious can't see that. He can't see that like Luke is that thing ultimately. So it's just more of that, but more of that terminology that it's like Luke can't, or Palpatine can't see that Luke's going to be able to turn Vader, and then that's how they're going to win.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think it's interesting, but he's doing it through redeeming his father.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes,
that's
that's all.
That's
just
interesting.
Interesting verbiage right there.
Well, it's interesting there because when he's like a redeemer, you know, in his eyes, he probably doesn't see reason why the Jedi would want to look for a redeemer in the first place, because they probably already think that they're good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So he's like, well, redeemer, huh? Did it say specifically which side? You know? Just kind of like thinking about it.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is like Redeemer implies that like something has been wrong and needs to be rectified, but so far nothing in their eyes has been wronged. Of course, we know the future because we ain't in Star Wars. Just saying.
I do think too the difference between, because a lot of times when you refer to the Jedi, or like we're talking about with Plagueis and Palpatine and all that stuff, referring to their blindness or their arrogance, I think a lot of it, especially like Seth, what you just brought up with Luke, it's like, I don't know if I would necessarily say blind. It's more just like the ability to not be aware of that. Like they just 100, like it's almost like Palpatine can't comprehend that something like that would happen. Yeah,
exactly.
Rather than a blindness, because I feel like
blindness
I'm
just going off of like everything's going as I have foreseen.
Yeah, 100%.
That's all I mean is that he can't see that outcome.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree with you. I just, for a lot of times when people bring up the blind, like the Jedi were blind to the dealings of Palpatine and all that stuff, I just think a lot of times it's, blindness almost feels like an impairment to me. It's almost like if you could, you would sort of deal in terms of if you could see, you would see, but it's more just like, they 100% don't have the awareness to even think that is something that could happen. You know what I mean? They don't even have the choice to want to see that, I guess is in my head.
That's
something like that. Yeah.
I would say the only difference is like with Palpatine and his blindness is that it's
shroud.
That like he cannot comprehend good.
Yeah.
It's like not something that is perceivable. Whereas with the Jedi, I think that they really are blind. It's like it's their arrogance. It's not a character flaw of the Jedi. It's that they're arrogant. And that creates.
Yeah. No, 100%. That's you said it better than I did. That's the separation that I was trying to make of like the Jedi could very well not be doing what they're doing right now and see what's going on right beneath their noses, as opposed to Palpatine, like the Luke scenario of he just 100% would never in a million years be aware of something like that because it just would never be on his radar. So that's what I mean in terms of like unawareness versus blindness, I guess. That's just something I've always thought of in the way those terms are used for both of them.
Sorry to like kind of sidetrack, but also not, because there's one line in here that kind of lines up with that. In this chapter, I didn't realize that when Palpatine is going to meet with the Naberi family and propose this idea, he kind of goes on a little thought tangent about some of the like legacy of the Sith and starts talking about the Jedi. And I'm going to read this here, and it gets into a whole bunch of stuff with Gravid and like someone named Darth Millennial, which I think is a really funny name.
I love that too.
Darth Gen Z.
But see, it says, for the Jedi, mastery was conferred when one attained a true understanding of the ways of the Force. For the Sith, that level of understanding was merely the beginning. The Jedi Order's homespun cloaks announced, I want for nothing because I am clothed in the Force. The cloaks of the Sith I am the light in the dark, the convergent of opposing energies. And yet, while all Sith Lords were powerful and not all were brilliant or in complete possession of the powers of the dark side granted them, Darth Millennial, blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting that Palpatine is the one thinking the cloaks of the Sith I am the light in the dark, the convergence of opposing energies. I didn't have that highlighted, but I'm reading at it and I'm like, that is like, what does he mean by that? I feel like an English teacher right now. Now, what does he mean by that, class?
Why is the door yellow?
Now, guys, why is Palpatine the light in the dark?
Yeah, I had also questioned that when I read it, because you never really think of, when you think of Sith, you don't think of light in the dark. That's like a hopeful thing. But I kind of just started to think of it as, oh, I am the being that has chosen to emerge myself within the dark. I pierce the dark. I am the dark, kind of thing. The dark radiates around me. Because if it was just darkness, that implies that there's nothing there other than that dark force. But if the darkness surrounds you, it's kind of like pulsing from you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I took it as like, he's that light, and so the darkness can follow him. That he's that beacon, if that makes sense. That's kind of what he was saying. But yes, he's the torch bearer that evil can follow, basically.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I'll move on to the next couple of chapters. We're wrapping up here pretty soon. Let's see. We did 20, 25. We are getting close to the skit. These next ones are a little beefier, so I apologize. Chapter 26. We get a little bit of a Maul perspective here as he waits and watches the Jedi Temple on the Lamerge building on Coruscant, which is the building where Palpatine almost got murked, but he didn't. He previously completed his mission on Dorvala by killing many in the businesses. Lamite Limited, Intergalactic Ore, Merge, blah, blah, blah. Gunray is promoted to the Directorate because of this. And some more stuff. But Maul is anxiously awaiting for his next mission. I had a lot written down here for just personal purposes, but they don't need to be said here. Palpatine, on the way to Iriadu, is requested by Varuna and stopped at Naboo. Varuna severely threatens Palpatine for collaborating with the Nabaris and attempting to get him out of office. Varuna plans to break off his connection with Plagueis and will use Black Sun, Gardula, and the Bando Gora instead. Palpatine is confident that Varuna will not have his way, and then he is in a way disappointed that they underestimated his ambitions, because they were very pro Ars Varuna back in Part 1. Plagueis quickly abandons Sojourn, requesting the data to be deleted. He leaves, and the Sith infiltrator, the Scimitar, as enemy forces tied to Varuna obliterate the forest and castle with nuclear weapons. Plagueis escapes successfully, boarding Jabba's cruiser, who gave him a tip of the attack. And he requests communications with King Varuna before heading to Coruscant.
That's the thing.
Yo, that's
he's got the thing.
By the way, that is I gotta say that is one of my favorite Star Wars ships. I think it's so cool. I love it.
Yep.
What did I miss? Would you guys all
Look at it?
cheer? Oh, he's got. Oh my gosh, he's got it. Okay, I was like,
The Scimitar.
Your eyes. Quit being blind.
Open your eyes. What are you showing me? Come on. Sorry, that's a Batman reference.
So I got a fun thing. I have to mention here before.
Yeah.
So should we tell? Did we discuss the next book? We could answer that really quick.
No, we did not.
No,
we're still talking Plagueis. Mr.
So
Zeus.
this is at the end of this chapter, and he's talking to Jabba, and he said, and Jabba says, "I hope to persuade you one day to share the secret of your invisible ship, Magister Damask." And this is really cool because a couple times in this book, they reference Heir to the Empire. And this is a big reference.
Yep.
And so in Heir to the Empire, they go to Mount Tantus because Thrawn wants some secret technology within Mount Tantus. And the secret technology, it's not cloning. Cloaking. Sorry. I thought you said cloning.
Come on, man.
He wants cloaking technology that was only something that the Sith and something that Palpatine had, was a way to cloak his ship, that he needed a way to cloak the Chimera to launch an attack on the New Republic. Heir to the Empire. And so this is a pretty huge thing because there's a couple.
There's another one in a couple chapters that I was like, whoa.
There's another Heir to the Empire reference later, but that was a pretty big one because I noticed at first when they were talking about the scimitar earlier that they were talking about they were mentioning the cloaking thing, and I was like, didn't Heir to the Empire mention that this was a pretty rare piece of technology? But then I was like, well, maybe these books weren't linked up in that way. But then this makes it pretty clear that, I mean, there was an intentional link.
Yeah.
In that Maul comic book that I don't know. Have they mentioned, they talked about that, right?
They haven't mentioned it yet.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he flies out in that book with the technology, like they're testing it, and he flies out cloaked amongst everything.
Oh yeah, because he goes right past the Jedi.
Yeah. He goes right over the. It's good. Yeah, it's a good scene.
But anyway, cool so I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was such a cool little link to Heir to the Empire.
I mean, the other one is pretty big. We'll get into it. That chapter connects to 4 different things. The one that we'll get to later. But this chapter is really cool. I love kind of seeing Plagueis not be a hermit as much anymore. Like we get the talks with Jabba, and then we get to see him kind of getting away from the planet and outplaying Varuna. And just also the visual of him looking back and seeing it get absolutely bombarded, and then the nuclear weapon going off on Sojourn. I'm like, we don't really see. The only thing I can really think of that would be a good visual would be in Rogue One when they get the single reactor ignition.
Yeah. Well, they mentioned it's rare. The nuclear weapons were very rare.
Yeah.
Well, I also thought that that little passage in general was just really interesting for Plagueis' characterization, specifically. When he's looking at all that, it says, deeply moved, Plagueis realized that he hadn't experienced such powerful emotions since he had said goodbye to Megiddo so many decades earlier and placed himself in the care of Darth Tenebris. You don't really, as far as I can remember, you don't see any point in this book where it's talking about Palpatine going like, oh, Palpatine was moved by that. Palpatine, was feeling wistful about that. Whereas, there's maybe twice, maybe a couple times where you can sense a little bit of emotion in there.
To your point, Cole, there's a couple moments even we see that with Maul, where Maul has a little bit of compassion, but you don't see that from Palpatine. You're absolutely right.
He's the devil.
Yeah, he's the devil.
He's the devil.
Yes.
Mr. Palpatine, he's the devil.
Mm-hmm. Which it makes you wonder, is that a positive character trait of Palpatine as a Sith, or did that make him a worse Sith of being so evil that did that blind him, or as we're talking about blind in quotes, or did that
it seems that I'm getting more for the impression from this book that that Palpatine, he is a very good villain, but he might not be a good Sith. You get the idea that I think we have this impression that the Sith are oh, they're just evil. They're completely evil. And it's no, from everything in the expanded universe, the Sith, they're pretty bad guys, but they're also they think what they are doing is right. They are open up to sometimes compassion and love and things like that.
I mean, Plagueis had the gilded cage theory. He wanted to put the entire galaxy behind golden bars, which that idea is that he wanted to essentially enslave everybody to keep everybody safe.
The Templars from Assassin's Creed.
It's exactly where that analogy comes from. Yep.
Well, I think with this book has also given me kind of that sort of insight into Palpatine. So the way that I'm seeing it right now, I mean, in terms of whether or not he's a good Sith, I can't really say 100%. But I think the grand plan needed Palpatine to succeed. I think the grand plan needed Plagueis to last. The longevity of it, Palpatine alone, I think that is what made it not stick around. I think Plagueis was all about the longevity, whereas Palpatine was I just want it to succeed. I want it to be me. It had to be a partnership. So I think that's what messed it up.
I would have loved to see if the plan would have succeeded had he not killed Plagueis. That would be a very interesting what if to be how would that have played out? And there's a whole lot of logistics
what
there.
Changes? Yeah, I mean, but really, what changes?
Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, the Clone Wars still happens.
But I'm saying, like, in terms of, like Cole said, the longevity of the Empire, like, I think you put Plagueis behind the mantle, like, you
think that there would be rebellions stepping up?
Oh, I think there would be rebellions, but like the thing is would they recruit Anakin? You know, like would like Plagueis is a lot more, like you said, he's a lot more Qui-Gon-ish in his Sith approach, where he's not.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that there would be no difference. I think Palpatine has a substantial amount more hubris than Plagueis does.
Yeah.
Plagueis for sure has hubris, but it was Palpatine's overconfidence that literally just that was his downfall. Even from even at the end there. I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, even though we're basically there. Like a lot of the stuff that he says about Plagueis is just kind of from his own twisted point of view in like his monologue. And it's all just out of this hubris of Palpatine.
Yeah.
So
in my head, Palpatine would have kept Plagueis alive in the same way Plagueis kept Venomous alive. Of like, like having him around.
Oh, I don't think there'd be
on the tank and be like, "Hey, how do I do this, old guy?"
Yeah, I don't think there's any world where Palpatine would have kept Plagueis alive. It's just an interesting thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my thought is just like if you're looking at the Force fighting back, and Anakin is ultimately in play, and all the cards are in play by the point where Palpatine kills Plagueis. I don't know really what changes by
Anakin had already been recruited by the Jedi. They wouldn't have been able to get him.
And I think that's Anakin
what I'm saying.
I think Anakin still is recruited by Palpatine because Maul is already, he's killed by this point. I mean, Dooku's already in the thrall. I think that all still probably plays out almost. I mean, yeah, you're going to have little microcosms of differences along the way, but I don't know. I don't know that there's. I think that you really start to question like once Return of the Jedi happens.
Yes, yeah.
It's like at that point.
Yeah,
that's my main thing.
What's that?
You think it would have been faster? Like
what do you mean?
Getting from this point to like if you
like the Empire would have endured for 20 years.
Yeah, if you start from like this of hey, he doesn't kill Plagueis to get to like maybe use the first bookend as Revenge of the Sith. Do you think that kind of takeover would have been faster to get to that point?
Question.
Now
I don't know.
Around?
I think that I think one of the big differences is I don't know that the Death Star would have happened because it's clear that Plagueis wasn't really into like the technology stuff. Like, he did his experiments, but they were very Force focused. He was into the Bith science, which Death Star feels more like I know it's not Sith related. I mean, they are using kyber crystals though, so I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit to that. So I think there could have been more pushback to the Death Star, and so maybe there would have been more political machinations to get the galaxy in line. But as far as like Vader being a part of it, I think everything is the same up until Revenge of the Sith, at least.
Yeah.
But then after that point, I think Cole has an interesting point where it's like, is Plagueis being like, who's the one ultimately pulling the strings behind Anakin when he gets turned? Because I think Anakin is still turned. It's like, who is the one who is really training him? I think that's really the key here of like what's going to make a difference. Because I think the biggest question is that could change the course is like, can you turn Anakin away from Padme, but still turn him to the dark side? Because if you can do that, then Anakin's unstoppable. What's that?
Yeah.
Would there have still been a need for Dooku, you think?
Anakin was too young.
Yeah.
You need someone in the middle to do that.
Well, Plagueis had mentioned
that's his role.
Yeah, Plagueis had mentioned that Dooku would potentially have a role in the future at some point.
Yeah.
So it seems like Palpatine mostly goes with Plagueis's plans. Say that 3 times fast. And then once he wins, it's all about Palpatine's longevity. I don't know. I think they handle things very differently. I mean, even Palpatine says, I wouldn't have been able to do this without you. I'll grant you that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how much longer it could have potentially lasted, because yes, the Force does bite back, but keep in mind, it didn't bite back against the Jedi Order for basically a millennium, essentially. I mean, it was so who knows if maybe there was something waiting in the wings instead. Because I mean, if Luke had gone there to fight Vader, Plagueis, and Palpatine. I'm sorry, man.
Oh, God.
I don't know about that.
But I mean,
don't
Luke and Anakin would have soloed them both.
I was gonna say,
They soloed all three of them.
Luke doesn't win. Luke does not defeat the Emperor, so that's the big thing in Return of the Jedi.
It's a very interesting thing. I'd love to
very
maybe
fun to think about. It's like what? Yeah. I don't know.
Put in the
what if, baby?
Yeah, exactly.
What if?
But yeah, this chapter is. Oh wait, I have something. I have a bookmark here, but I don't know why I have a bookmark here.
Well, last place you were reading.
No, in Kindle you can put
Grayson finding out what a bookmark is for.
What is this thing in my book?
I marked my book here for some reason, but I don't know what.
I just wanted to say I love when Palpatine gets summoned to Naboo to speak with Varuna. And like Varuna is just so mad, but Palpatine, he knows, he's like, you're not gonna get your way, bro. Like it's just not gonna happen. Like he's not even worried about it.
Self-satisfied with that.
He's such a jerk.
I love him. I love it. Man, I have so much highlighted. I'm not even gonna worry about it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do the next.
I think we should get to the end.
Yeah.
You want to just quickly do 27, 28, and then get to the end?
Yeah. Because
you can. Yeah, I can try to make it quick, but that's 5 chapters we got here, so we'll see.
Let's do 27 through 29. How about that?
But I mean, like at the same time.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. We'll be able to cover a lot. It's just I have a lot written down. So
okay, I was just gonna say that like at this point we're in the Phantom Menace.
Yep.
Yes, we are.
So, like we've all seen that movie.
Yep.
Well, we're not quite in the Phantom Menace. We're about to be.
Okay.
Yeah, we're close. We're really close.
Because we're right at the point where they planned the blockade and all that stuff.
Woo!
No!
So anyway, chapter 27. Palpatine meets Plagueis in his apartment on Coruscant. And Plagueis' words with Varuna made him
I skipped ahead, guys. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. So Plagueis, basically, he gets communications with Varuna. We don't get to see it, but Varuna is so scared by Plagueis that he resigns, and Padme is appointed as queen. Varuna has gone into hiding, and Palpatine tells the Directorate. Palpatine tells, what is he? I don't know what I wrote down here. That the Nebula Front leaders had been killed. That happens in some book. I believe it's in Cloak of Deception by James Luceno, which is Maul goes to Dorvala to kill those people. A whole lot of technical stuff here. This Erodium is transported to Valorum shipping to frame the Chancellor, and Gunray is placed as the head of the Trade Federation by default. This is all in the book Cloak of Deception. Maybe one day we'll read it. I'm not going to get into it. That was a book that came out, I believe, in 2003. The Trade Federation is angry with Palpatine for some reason, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Palpatine tasked Maul with hunting down the Black Sun's Vigos, which are the leaders of the Black Sun, which is in that comic book that Seth was referring to earlier. And the Trade Federation are moved to be put in place for the blockade of Naboo. And then Plagueis, this is a very condensed little tail end right here, but it's probably the part I would want to talk about. Plagueis finds Varuna's hidden mansion and breaks in, revealing his nature as a Sith, and kills him. And that part is very good. 2008, chapter 28. Maul in 2008. Chapter 28. Maul defeats the Vigos, which is in the 2004 issue Darth Maul run, but suffers an injury to his hand. Palpatine tells him to only bask in the glory of when he is actually won, and he tells him to leave Coruscant for the time to train and learn from his mistake. Palpatine and Plagueis meet in public, discussing the blockade and the army that will fight alongside the Jedi. Plagueis tells Palpatine to launch the blockade, but Palpatine reveals that Hathmon Char has gone missing, and Palpatine dispatches Maul to hunt him down. This is in the book Darth Maul Shadow Hunter, which I read earlier this year. Very good book.
Yeah.
There's a lot. This is the part where you're like, okay, there's all this other stuff, and you could tell they were trying to fill in the gaps. But on an orbital, we jump ahead on an orbital station. A political gathering is held. Palpatine awaits the holocron that Hathmon Char had about the blockade. Plagueis speaks to Sifo Dyas about creating a clone army in secret, and then Palpatine receives the holocron from Lorne Pavan, which Darth Maul Shadowhunter. That literally happens in Shadowhunter. Little side note, we'll talk. I'll let Connor do the honors in just a second. Valorum is going. Valorum is going through it as he discovers and tells Palpatine that someone is out to get him, which is Cloak of Deception stuff. And the Queen of Naboo contacts them about the blockade, pleading for help. We are now in the Phantom Menace.
Invasion.
I will say one of my criticisms of this book and is what you just mentioned about all these connecting tissues right here. It feels like so in Ahsoka, in episode 7, when you have Carson Teva, who's like, "What about Mandalore?" And you're like, and it's like, "Hey, remember Mandalore in season 3?"
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
For a second, that's what this feels like. Where it's like,
it feels
got a book over here. Don't forget to read that.
It feels a little bit even, I would say, more extreme than that too, because it's like these are major events that are happening.
Yeah, I know. It's just out there.
By the way, read our other
check
book.
out Darth Maul Shadowhunter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's exactly like that. It's
like in comics, how like when they're like, if you want to know what happens to the X-Men here, just go to the X-Men Uncanny X-Men. It's
It's a little, I don't know, it's a little heavy-handed in this. I think
it's on one side, I appreciate that they're connecting it to these other stories where it's like, oh, these were stories that people spent time reading. Like, that's really cool. But on the other hand, it's like when that stuff on Dorvala and then the Black Sun Vigos and then Shadowhunter, like, to be honest, had I not read Shadowhunter earlier this year and then talked with Seth, about the comic book, I would have been like, wait, what is happening right now? Like, we're just jumping these spans of time. And then I was like, oh, well, I had to look up the Dorvala stuff and be like, is this a separate book too? And then it popped up. Oh, Cloak of Deception by James Luceno. Gotcha. Okay. Which is an assassination attempt that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan stop on Chancellor Valorum. Darth Maul is involved. It's like, not that they ever meet Maul, but Maul's doing kind of his stuff. And then Shadowhunter is him thwarting this Nemoidian guy, basically, who's trying to blackmail the Trade Federation. Yeah. But a character is at this summit on this orbital station, Connor.
There is. Joruus C'baoth, not Jaruus C'baoth, but Joruus C'baoth. The original, which this is always so funny to me because if you don't understand that joke, in Heir to the Empire, this is the other reference, there is Joruus, which is Joruus, because for some reason, Timothy Zahn, when he was denoting clones, would put an extra vowel in their name. So you have Luke. And I get it. It's like when you're reading,
it's always used too.
It's an easy way to read that, but you can't like say it,
Yeah,
so this is Joruus C'baoth. I think that now that this is cool to me. This is a cool little reference because it's just a quick little drop. Because
that is
the original Joruus C'baoth is not really that consequential of a Jedi. He's just, I mean, he goes on outbound flight, but that's about his only significant action as a Jedi, as far as I understand. I'm not a huge Legends guy, but that's as far as I know. It's his clone counterpart that is the big guy in Legends. So that's neat. I do have another mention here, just a quick reference, Mount Umate that they mention when they're on that courtyard. That's in Mandalorian season 3. That's you remember when they're on the episode on Coruscant?
Yes, I picked up. I picked up on that. I forgot. That was a really cool little reference that they had in there.
I thought that was neat because I remember vaguely hearing about that when Mando season 3 dropped. People, I think, talking about this book.
Yeah,
I don't think this book was the first mention of it. I think it's technically in Revenge of the Sith in like a background shot or something.
Just in the spirit of references, it just made me think about it. It was several chapters ago when Plagueis is watching a holo recording of Maul fighting. When Maul takes out like the dual-bladed lightsaber, Plagueis is like, "Oh, Exar Kun, he's doing what Exar Kun." It just made me think that like he was like fanboying or something. I don't know. I just thought that was funny.
I've always loved the idea that like double-bladed lightsabers were. I mean, we don't really see them a lot even now, but the idea that they're like a really kind of ancient Sith method, you know. And granted, the Old Republic is just like everybody's got a double-bladed lightsaber, but it's a cool thing of like, oh, Maul's the first person in a while to have a double-bladed lightsaber. I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Speaking of Maul, this was a cool little thing right here. So this is when Palpatine is kind of chastising him a little bit. And he says, when you face someone strong in the Force, you must remain focused, even when you're convinced that your opponent is incapacitated. Then is not the time to bask in the glory of your victory or draw out the moment. You must deliver a killing strike and be done with it. Reserve your self-praise for after the fact, or you will suffer more than a hand wound. And
that's exactly what happens to him.
It's exactly.
He didn't learn that lesson.
I mean, it happens twice to him.
Yep.
But I mean, it mentions later that he wanted nothing more than to kill a Jedi Master. So he kills Qui-Gon, and then he just sits there and toys with Obi-Wan. He's like slashing the thing, you know, cutting sparks, and he doesn't just. He could have easily just.
Yep.
All right. See ya.
That's so ironic because that's exactly what happens to Palpatine.
But that's what I was saying. Is it happens to Palpatine?
Like, both times you're just like, nah, you're so stupid. You know,
the arrogance always gets to him. But I think it's
their overconfidence is their weakness. That's the way of the Sith. That's the thing
the difference between the two moments, though. I know we keep talking about it, but I find it so fascinating. Is that like with Maul, it is just. It's not only arrogance, but it's just stupidity. Like he's just Maul beats him, or Obi-Wan beats Maul by cutting him in half, like by a show of strength when Maul could have just defeated him. Whereas Luke, Palpatine's not underestimating Luke's power because even if Luke wanted to, he couldn't defeat him with his own abilities, you know, but he does get caught up in the moment in other ways. But I think that's a fascinating sort of, that's always the arrogance. But anyway, so that was the kind of the moments that I stuck out to me.
You should just be done with it.
Yeah. The one part too that I thought was interesting that you just brought up, Connor, too, was when later on, when Palpatine is like, oh, did you tell him that you were an apprentice and not a Sith Lord? Like that kind of thing. And oh yeah, you got your hand hurt. And then he was pissed that he didn't tell him about it. But that when he's talking to Plagueis about it, of like, him worried about him not divulging the information about what he was doing there, and Maul didn't tell him. Is he doing the same thing to me that I'm probably going to end up doing to Plagueis? Plagueis does say the same thing to Palpatine when Palpatine is when whatever happens of the guy from Ryloth is like, I vote Palpatine
on Frita.
Exactly. I vote Palpatine to be the new guy in charge, and Palpatine turns to Plagueis and is like, oh, well, we've won, my master, or something like that. And Plagueis is like, not yet. It's not done until it's done, sort of thing, which is literally the exact same. It's just like, it's crazy how the master keeps telling the apprentice and the apprentice. It's just continuous of like, don't get ahead of yourself, because that's literally the one thing that kills us every time. It's like the number one rule of the Sith, that they just keep losing. So I really enjoy. I'm happy. Thank you for bringing that up, Connor, because that was something that I wanted to.
No, that's a great call. I didn't even think about that. That's awesome.
It's a quick one, because it's more just like, shut up, we haven't won yet, and then they kind of breeze by it. It's not as big as the whole Palpatine Maul thing, but it's very cool to see just kind of that same method being taught in such a small moment as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point that you make, because he not only does he chastise Maul for gloating, but he also chastises him for revealing that he is a Sith. Yeah. He's like, well, what if he got away? And, you know, the whole thing would be revealed. But literally a chapter before, Plagueis was telling Varuna that he was, you know, Darth Plagueis. And so when he
even
Plagueis
thinks about
later.
That.
Yeah, when Plagueis meets Palpatine later, and like they're talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, he revealed himself. It was so stupid." Plagueis is basically like, "He was winning."
Yeah,
makes sense. So,
I have a couple things.
Wait, hold on, Grayson. Seth, what were you gonna say? Because I saw you put your hand up.
I was just gonna say that it's that Sith ambition, where it's just like, like it doesn't, like any little baby step. All right, let's take 6 more.
Yeah,
where it's like and I feel like that's just all examples of that, where, you know, no matter what level you're at, like whether you're Sith assassin, Sith apprentice, or Sith master, you all fall into that. Basically, is that I think that's the dark side, is that ambition to just keep going and taking and going and climbing until eventually there's you are your own undoing, basically.
I wonder if that's because patience is a Jedi trait.
Probably.
And so it doesn't come naturally to the Sith.
Yeah.
I love that.
I wanted to talk about also one of my favorite sections in the book, because I glanced over it very briefly in the summary. Plagueis going to Naboo to kill Ars Varuna. Really cool section. This weird second Assassin's Creed reference, but it felt very Assassin's Creed, very stealth mission in the rain, like out in the middle of nowhere in Naboo. Like it was cool. Though I think he uses the Force on like a window to like make it like unsealed, so like it like pops out of the panel.
Oh yeah.
And then he like goes in, and it's just so clean the way he does it. And then literally like at the foot of Varuna's bed, and Varuna is like freaking out, but he's already disabled the alarms and stuff. It's when you get to see Plagueis in action, it's really cool stuff. I really like it.
He's a beast, and he's super mean to that guy.
Yeah, that guy deserved it.
No, he did. He's super mean.
I want to talk about that really quick. Is like when it gets to that plot twist, and it gets to moments like this, I know that these guys are bad, but I cannot help but root for Plagueis, and maybe not Palpatine, but I can't help but root for Plagueis. You know, where I'm like, yeah, I don't hate you that much. You know,
they do make him in a weird way like sympathetic, especially toward the end of the book, because you're like, yeah, you know, he's been working really hard to these goals, and we've mentioned it several times now, but he's not evil.
Well,
like he does bad stuff, but
it's almost as if he's an instrument of that side of the Force. Like the Force is using him. Kind of like Qui-Gon is an instrument.
He often describes
himself
as that too.
Yeah, that it's like that he's just a vehicle for like everything to get further.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Like Plagueis is sort of allowing himself to be an instrument of the dark side, whereas Palpatine is wrestling the dark side into his grasp.
Yeah.
It's very antithetical to the Sith what Plagueis is doing, but I'm not, and I would need to clarify, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, I love what Plagueis is doing. He's doing awesome stuff. What a good guy. I'm just saying, like,
well, no, it's the same way you like root for like a villain, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, it's simply perspective bias. You typically want to root for the person that you've been following all this time, even if it's not like I want them to do these bad things. It's just I've spent this entire dang book with Plagueis. You know, like it's kind of fulfilling to see the things that I want to do. Happen.
I think
once again, Cole has put into like one sentence what we just spent 2 minutes trying to explain.
Not a problem, guys. I got you.
To bring it back to Star Wars too, it's kind of that same thing of like while you're watching Revenge of the Sith, especially like the first time you were watching Revenge of the Sith, you were waiting for Anakin to become Vader the whole time. You're like, it's not necessarily like, oh, you're rooting for this guy to do bad stuff, but you're also just like, that guy's going to be Vader and it's going to happen. Or like the Joker movie where you're like, you're just waiting for this guy to become the Joker the entire time. It's you're waiting for Palpatine to become Palpatine. It's always that like waiting for the guy to become the guy, you know, sort of deal, which I think is some of the
there's a catharsis about it.
Stuff. Yeah.
I love this line that I highlighted, where Varuna is like I abdicated. Isn't that what you wanted? Isn't that enough? And it's just a simple line, but the way I just hear it in my head, Plagueis responds, "Your abdication would have been enough had you not tried first to have killed me." And like Varuna is just freaking out at this point.
Like, you nuked my house, man. I can't just let that slide.
He's like, you blew up my favorite place. Like they blew up the Wendy's down the street, man. I'd go after all of them, you know? No, just kidding. But he also, Plagueis reveals himself as a Sith in this moment, which is kind of an interesting small parallel to like the mishap that Maul does, where, you know, Maul reveals it, but obviously he got ahead of himself.
That's a really good point, Grace.
What?
I made that exact point like 10 minutes ago.
About Plagueis revealing himself to Ars Varuna?
Yeah. I was comparing them towards each other.
Oh, I thought you were talking about
wow, Grace is just checking out of the conversation.
Copycat.
Okay. Sorry. Jeez. Well, you guys can do the recap. But you don't have it.
Seth, go ahead, Seth.
Sir.
But what about when like we were talking like an hour and a half ago about the Force stopping him from being able to be too ambitious and like revealing too much about the plan? I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that the Force is now allowing them to say these things.
Well, I don't think that, I think that the Force that would have been detrimental, not to necessarily their plan.
If any of these guys got away, it would have been detrimental to the plan, though.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it as like if the Force is some omniscient deity.
Yeah.
If Plagueis would have mentioned Camino and Jocasta heard that, we know from the prequels that upends everything.
She wouldn't have remembered that.
Yeah,
brother. She kept the archives.
Jedi Alzheimer's.
But if so, in the same way, if the Force is omniscient, then it would not. These guys aren't.
I'm just pulling it back to the conversation. It's interesting. Yeah. Sorry. Anyway, continue.
It's honestly like almost 2 months ago when we did the first episode of this, when Plagueis is like falling under the rocks. And that was probably the Force too, right?
Yeah, right.
that was Force. That was probably the will of the Force doing that to put him under the rocks, right? In chapter 1, it's probably the same thing.
Prologue.
The prologue,
also,
yeah.
Since you're talking about it in the chat, that thing is awesome, Tony. That sealed thing.
Oh,
I'm freaking out about it every time you bring it up. I'm a sucker for coins, and that is so cool.
Yeah,
that is rad.
Target exclusive. Look at that.
Dude,
baby.
You can. I'll give it to you.
I got it on eBay. It's like dirt cheap. But is it sealed?
I just didn't want people to think I was like a lunatic, like over here, like freaking out about that.
Is it sealed?
What do you mean? I
have sealed.
No,
brand new.
No, but my coin is still sealed because it's in a plastic thing.
It better be sealed. We'll take a look at it.
Okay. You can't open it unless like with a hammer.
Tony's gonna grade it.
Fine. Next stream, I'll bring the coin. We'll
the coin.
It. Yeah.
Okay, so what are we on? We're on 28.
Yeah, guys.
29. 29. I got you guys.
Yeah.
Well, that's 2.
And the epilogue. Don't get ahead of yourself, Connor. That's right. Just kidding. The epilogue is like 3 pages. Chapter 29, Palpatine and Plagueis get news from Valorum that he dispatched 2 Jedi to Naboo. So they start the invasion early and prepare Maul. Plagueis watches Maul and Palpatine convene on Coruscant. We are now really in the events of the Phantom Menace. Plagueis senses that this will be the last time Palpatine and his apprentice will see each other in person as master and apprentice. Yep. And then Pestage and Doriana launch a campaign to weaken Palpatine's rivals. And Palpatine plans on manipulating Queen Amidala to call a vote for no confidence. You know, stuff in the movie. But Palpatine meets with Dooku about the former's motivations, the latter's disillusionment, and then Anakin Skywalker about how they found him.
That's the coolest scene. I think that's my favorite in the whole book. Palpatine and Dooku talking.
Yeah, this is the one where they were talking about how they didn't want Dooku to become a Sith. They were scared of him becoming full Sith just to let him come to the dark side naturally because they didn't want to give him all that knowledge and power. Was that this chapter?
I don't know. This moment that I'm referring to, it's Palpatine and Dooku talking, and they're talking about like their motivations for what's gonna. I can pull it up here in a second. I think what you're talking about might be the chapter after,
gotcha.
But it might be in the chapter, and I didn't write it down. We'll see in just a second. But the last thing in this chapter is that Plagueis, now that he knows about Anakin Skywalker, he desperately attempts to meet Anakin, but narrowly misses him, panicking, wondering if his actions have caused their undoing, which we talked about earlier. I like that. It is very good. He's like, is Anakin Skywalker here or whatever?
Yeah.
Plagueis. Go ahead.
I like the idea of him running out like in his bathrobe and slippers.
Yeah.
Like, we gotta find this guy. Like just running. You just missed him.
there's like toilet paper on his shoe or something as he's running.
Exactly.
He's half shaved. He's got shaving cream on half of his face.
Yeah.
Chapter 30, Plagueis rushes to meet Palpatine at the Senate, and Palpatine is nominated for Chancellor. Plagueis watches Amidala, Anakin, and the Jedi leave Coruscant, but he has a vision of the future and declares that Qui-Gon must die to stop the boy from being trained.
Yeah, dude, that's wild. That is wild.
So good. Plagueis warns the other. I have written that Plagueis warns other factions to leave the Republic. I'm not really sure what that was about. I'll check in a second. And Palpatine is why does it say, oh, he's nominated for Chancellor, and then Palpatine is close to winning the vote. And then Palpatine and Plagueis attend the opera the night before the vote. We're getting into this short, guys. They retire to Plagueis' penthouse to celebrate and ponder the next morning's speech. Plagueis drinks too much, and he begins to doze off. Palpatine is about to leave, but and then when he's doing his monologue, but then, sorry, Palpatine begins to leave, but then decides to electrocute his respirator, which disables it, and then he goes on a huge monologue, basking in his glory, like we were talking about, and then force chokes him to death. And I'll save the epilogue because it's very brief, but that's basically towards the very end of everything. Wild how fast this goes through Phantom Menace, but it's really cool.
Because you can
It
watch
really
the movie.
snowballs.
So
What'd you say?
You can just watch the movie. You know what I mean? Like, this is all just kind of, that's why it snowballs, I feel like, where it's just kind of like,
yeah, because like
that you can just like, they're just filling in those little gaps.
So
Yes.
I'll just read this and we can kind of riff off this because this is huge, I think. So I love the idea that Plagueis is just kind of hanging out in like a speeder while they're all getting off the Qui-Gon Mall or Qui-Gon Mall, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Jar Jar. They're all getting off their speeder onto that platform to get on the Nubian starfighter. And I like that he's there for this moment specifically because what are they talking about? Is this because this is where they're
That's
talking
training
about
him, right?
This is where they're talking about the midichlorians.
Midichlorians.
So this is where, Plagueis would have had. I just think that's interesting that is where Plagueis is present for, is that conversation.
It gave me a chuckle. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I thought, go ahead.
I was just going to read this section. So it's like, so he says, what, Plagueis asked himself, what topic has summoned such an earnest look on Qui-Gon's face and such a confused urgency in the boy, clearly the midichlorians. Lifting his face from the macro binoculars, he stretched out with the Force and fell victim to an assault of perplexing images, ferocious battles in deep space, the clashing of lightsabers, partitions of radiant light, a black helmeted cyborg rising from a table. By the time his gaze had returned to the platform, Qui-Gon and the boy had disappeared.
So good.
So good.
You got a good narrator voice, man.
Thank you.
Ooh.
You should do the audiobook for that.
Yeah. It's so good.
Check out Connor's audiobook.
I used to announce sports, so.
Oh, really?
Oh. No, I was
Little
I was
fun fact.
chuckling to myself when I was reading that part, like not with the visions, but with how invested he is in the midichlorians, and he's like, "Oh, I wonder what they're talking about." Like of course he's there for that. I was like, man,
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I just think that's so funny. But I think it's interesting that the vision he gets of Vader is that image, like, because everything before that, like, what is he seeing? Is he seeing the Clone Wars? Is he seeing the Galactic Civil War? But the partitions of radiant light, that's the Duel of the Fates, right?
Yep. I think so. Or
I would say it's considering it ends with Vader rising from the table. I'm going to assume it's the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
It's just weird that it starts with Clone Wars, but then goes back to Phantom Menace, but then goes to.
I thought the radiant light was Mustafar because it's so bright from the volcano and everything. Like when you're looking at it, it's so orange and bright with all of the sabers and like the sabers going back and forth and all of that. I always thought the flash of light was Mustafar because you're right, Connor. It goes from Clone Wars to Vader, so I just always assumed the thing in between.
I don't know the way that's worded is partitions of radiant light, like a partition is.
Yeah, like
those
red
force fields,
things,
right?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's I could be either. I don't know. I mean, I think they're intentionally vague, except for the last part.
I took it as Anakin Obi-Wan's clash of lightsabers, and then Vader's the thing that rises from
Correct.
the table.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, that's cool. The last
image.
Yeah.
This
Dude,
one
it's
is
not
definitely
because like when now that I'm thinking about it, when I was originally reading it, I thought it was him getting up from a table. No, it's him rising from the table. Yeah,
I love this. Can we pull up this comment from the chat from Joanna in our chat? It's crazy that vision is what causes him to order Qui-Gon's death because I took it as he doesn't want it to come to pass, but by killing Qui-Gon, he solidifies that future. I mean,
like
exactly.
Anakin.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. Like that is tragedy, right? Like that, like Greek tragedy is that's an element of that genre of storytelling, is that by trying to avert prophecy, you end up fulfilling it.
Yep.
But yeah, she's right. Like, I mean, at the very end of that page, the boy would change the course of history unless Maul had to kill Qui-Gon to keep the boy from being trained. Qui-Gon was the key to everything. And I think this begs the question, what came first? Lucino coming up with the interpretation of the Duel of the Fates, or Dave Filoni?
I would assume David had read it at that point.
That's what I'm thinking. Is like that interview had. I wonder if he had read this book. And
I think it's a George thing.
I mean, yeah, it is a George thing. I'm kind of just like playing off of that, because I mean that's a very famous
devil's advocate.
Yeah, because Seth and I had a funny argument about that on our show about like the Duel of the Fates. It's the name of the lightsaber battle. It's the name of the track. So obviously that's what it's all about. But
at the time that this was being written, do you think that Filoni had any like tampering with it at all? Because he was working for Lucasfilm at the time.
He would have been low on the totem pole, right? What year was this?
I know he was being consulted, at least in terms of the Path of the Jedi books.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's because they were directly related to this stuff. So I don't know.
That's what I mean is like if he was already being asked questions about other things.
This is 2011 is when it came out.
I mean, it was not same year.
Well, I thought that was pre-Mortis. I thought Mortis was 2012.
Yeah, but they worked on it. They like had 2-year lead times.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think he was really at that.
He's still low on the totem pole, right?
Yeah, because I mean, only just recently is he now like creative exec, right?
Yeah, I mean, they'd be on season 3 at this point of Clone Wars.
I just think it only comes into question because there's that interview. I don't know if you guys have heard of now I'm forgetting his name. One of the 3 writers from the Path of the Jedi series. They collaborated directly with Filoni.
Back and forth.
And that same time, the first book came out in 2011. So
that's why I asked, just because I know, especially like that, and then you look at like the sequels and Filoni having talks with Rian Johnson about like, oh, what about this and what about this, and it's all there's always like a weird looming Filoni like peeking his head in the door, be like, "Hey, what are you guys talking about?"
I think he was kind of in an advisory maybe capacity.
There it is.
That's awesome.
The Filoni
partner.
Yeah.
Howdy.
Anyway, were you saying something, Seth?
Howdy.
Oh, all right. What's up?
All right. So anyway, on to the cool stuff. We get some. And he killed him in his sleep.
Yeah. There's like
guys, because like he just sits there and takes it.
Yep.
Like, because like the book has shown that if he needs to cut loose, he'll cut loose. But he's so confident, his own hubris. I can weather the Force storm, if you will. And he cannot.
Yeah.
His body gives out on him.
Well, he is also drunk, so.
I see it as like
drug with power.
Plagueis finally it's the consequence of the lesson. They did win, and so now he lets his guard down.
He lets his guard down. The respirator gets zapped, and he's drunk.
Yeah.
Also, it is implied
Chewbacca's bowcaster. It is. That's why he wasn't as. It's the same.
It's also implying it does. I mean, Plagueis. I mean, Palpatine kills Plagueis by choking him. It's also implied that he's like choking him this entire time. But
what?
Yes, Seth.
It's another respirator Palpatine's lightning destroys.
Yeah.
Like Vader.
Yeah, I thought he was choking. I thought he was choking because his respirator got zapped.
Yeah, yes. He attacks the respirator.
Yeah.
But so just back on like this recurring thing of the dark side saying, "Hey, do this." Palpatine was going to leave, and it says again, his eyes darted around the room, and the dark side whispered, "Your election assured, the sun guards absent, Plagueis unsuspecting and asleep."
Yep.
And then he moved in a blur. It's very like I just love the dark side just kind of going. It's just like
the rocks in chapter 1.
Now's the time.
Yeah. There's Zinchi. 8 minutes ago, he put a comment, and I'm trying to see if this is in the book or if he just did this. This sounds familiar, but he said he reaches for his coat, and the dark side taps him on the shoulder and reminds him of his debt.
I think that's kind of just like the Grim Reaper sort of deal. I don't remember that.
Oh.
Like that's a very good metaphor.
He does stop at the door, doesn't he? Though, and look
he does.
No, I mean Cole referenced it. I mean, it's exactly what happens. But yeah, I think that's kind of the. I like the idea of the Force. Calling it the dark side is interesting. Like it's an unreliable narrator type of thing.
It's nasty.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that it's not just the dark side. It's like the Force itself is telling him, hey, Plagueis has got to go so that Anakin can rise and Darth Vader can come and Luke can then say Vader and the galaxy can get reset. That like the Force is playing the long game. And if it needs to Palpatine to believe that it's the dark side, then so be it. But
yeah. And it's interesting that it's phrased as the dark side instead of saying all that. It's just like, you could win if you killed him right now. You're like, you'd be on top if you did this.
It's the same. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Plagueis when he kills Tenebris. It
all goes back to the rocks.
The rocks, man.
The rocks.
The rocks.
The Dwayne Johnsons.
I also see it as like I also see this moment as like Plagueis has built his entire life up to this, like being able to save himself from death, and it really is ironic. You know, I mean, it is like.
Yeah.
All it takes is one slip up and you're done. Like that's it. It doesn't matter how much work you put into it up until that point. It was always a futile task because you cannot continue that. Like, yes, you might be able to keep your life force going, but your mind can't keep up with it, you know, and all this eventually something will give and then something will take advantage of that. I do like this line right here. Thidius sighed, a tragedy, really, for one so wise.
Yeah,
it's like,
okay, Dr. Seuss.
Like I think Lucino is really. Lucino does it. Like I feel like what he did was he wrote out a bunch of lines he wanted in this book, and was like, "Okay, where does this got to go?" Because there's a few things. Like there's one I didn't mention it earlier. It's in a chapter where they're talking about the Rhodians. And they mention how like the Rhodians always shoot first or something like that.
They say that? I did not pick up on that at all.
I'll find it. Well, you guys talk for other stuff.
I got a second. Can you bring up the most recent comment in the audiobook? It was very cool because the narrator used the voice that sounds very familiar to Plagueis to push Palpatine to kill Plagueis. It's like what you guys were saying earlier, where like it was a voice when Plagueis spoke, it didn't sound like Plagueis. And it reminds me of Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, you know, where like all of a sudden, like he crowns Darth Vader, and then he's like, "The Force is strong with us." Like it's literally the dark side is speaking through.
Yeah, that's
now,
true.
Rather than
thought of that.
I just got those vibes.
Yeah, because there's a cool bit where like the dark side actually gives Sidious the name Vader to give to Vader. Like that's why he pauses in that moment where he's like, and you shall be known.
And then that weird sound that he makes, that like frog, like that. It's like
it's almost like it's like a possession.
Yes, exactly. It's like that's how I kind of took it. Is that like that's the dark side talking? Yeah,
that's so good. I have never picked up on that.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think that's how it's phrased in the Revenge of the Sith book. I really want to say that's how Palpatine reaches out into the Force and like the Force responds.
Yeah, it is in Revenge of the Sith book. Yeah, you're right. I couldn't remember what book, but obviously it was that one. I don't know why it comes to them.
Yeah.
Gosh, where's this thing? I know it's in here.
Another thing I found interesting though is that when Palpatine is shocking Plagueis. He remarks that Plagueis looks at him like he's challenging him, like I'm not going to die.
Yeah. Down. It's an internal struggle rather than a physical struggle, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah,
I like that it's not this big bombastic, you know, because we know he gets killed in his sleep technically. It did kind of bother me a little bit. I was like, okay, but he's not really technically asleep, but that's okay. That's fine. Like,
well, he started killing him after he fell asleep.
Yeah,
I think that's the idea.
I mean,
he says it in the scene. He's like, he's just like, And then his apprentice tried to kill him in his sleep, and then he woke up, and his apprentice shocked him again, and he knocked out, and then he got back up. And then...
Wait, is this you?
And then they had a stare off, and I yelled. I mean, he yelled for a bit.
And by the way, just because this is a great time to mention this, that is one of the more brilliant parts of Revenge of the Sith, and all of Revenge of the Sith is brilliant, but that part, the fact that they were able to come up with this entire book is based off of one scene in Revenge of the Sith. And I think that is so cool. And Ian's performance during that, where you know, it's never explicitly told to you that that's his master, but you just know that. I think take that for granted because we know as Star Wars fans, but it's all just inferred by Ian's performance. And I think that's so great. I did find that thing, by the way, real quick. Palpatine laughed to himself. Anaconda Farr thought of politics the way his Rhodian brethren thought of bounty hunting. Shoot first, ask questions later.
Yeah, I remember that. That's so funny. As the Rhodians thought about bounty hunting, McClunky.
Yep.
Was
so funny.
Connor, was that scene you're talking about this?
You ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
No, it's the one after that.
Yeah, it comes
okay. I don't have that yet.
We'll have to get the full arsenal.
This just makes me want to watch Revenge of the Sith.
Right?
Watch party.
I do have
right now.
That's me.
We're gonna crack that open. Look at the coin.
I do
thinking about it.
I do want to read what Palpatine says though, just as he's about to kill Plagueis, because it's just a really good monologue. If that is okay.
Sure.
Like the whole thing?
It's long, I mean just no, it's just this.
Okay,
gotcha. I have 10 pages or something.
I do have a quick question after every.
No, not the whole thing. I'm just going from the very beginning, but
okay.
Go ahead, Seth. Mine's not important.
I just what?
No, I'm realizing it's a long monologue. I don't need to do it. Go ahead.
Okay. I just was curious what you guys thought about this like verbiage of a force storm, because like we've heard because in Dark Empire the comic, like Palpatine accidentally like conjures a force storm and that's what destroys his ship, and it's like here they're in an apartment and Plagueis conjures a force storm, doesn't he? Basically,
yeah.
But
don't they say like a force storm?
Does anybody played the PS2 Force Unleashed game?
Yeah.
Yes.
Specifically on PS2 there is a move called it is called Force Maelstrom, and it's in this very brief proximity, and when you do a certain input you like swirl everything around you and like electrocute stuff in its proximity, and that's kind of how I envision in this apartment. It's just in this contained space, things are getting blown around and he's
So like the only thing I can think of in the trilogy is like when Palpatine dies, like it's literally like a hurricane for a moment.
Yep.
There is a force storm because that's his soul leaving his body basically.
Yep.
I just don't know. It's just weird verbiage because like I wonder what a force storm is like. That's what I'm kind of getting at.
I was kind of on the same level with Grayson here because if anyone's played Battlefront 2 2017,
he makes that.
Palpatine has like this like miasmic cloud move
that weakens.
Like, and it just kind of like morphs everything around. Yeah.
I also I think you could also just take it figuratively of like the force is a storm culminating between but it's
curious, that's all. That's my
I like that it can be open to interpretation of like, is it a physical storm or is it a metaphorical storm? Is it both? I mean it could be both, but I like that. I like that it's like, and it doesn't really matter, but because he's killing Plagueis regardless. So, but I did envision it as like, the almost literally like a storm in that apartment. But
not to bring up Rise of Skywalker again, everybody's favorite.
Dude, what is with you, man?
I know. I'm sorry. I'm such a Disney
Connor Jr.
That's all we care about. It's the sequel trilogy.
Shill.
Dude, we're a bunch of shills, man.
But when Palpatine shoots lightning out of his hands and it hits all of the
dubstep
that are above him. Yes, exactly. That's referred to as Palpatine's force storm.
So canon.
Kind of again. I'd also like, just to go off of the storm thing, like their power is released in lightning. So
yeah,
a force storm is always kind of, I've always just pictured it as like, maybe there are force clouds like around, like if there is force lightning and all of it is, there's wind and there's rain and there's all of this going on. I've always been like, oh yeah, if they could just shoot lightning out of their hands, what would be a lot of lightning? A storm. So
yeah, there's unstable lightning.
Yeah,
there's the Bendu from Rebels. You know, when he goes all cloud like.
Yeah, good one.
Good call.
And I just because he brought up the sequels, I just want to say, actually, I guess I'll wait.
Yeah, that's one of the sound effects is we can't hear it. Dude, well, little side thing before I give it to you, Cole. I remember being outside of the theaters, like when like I'd already seen the movie, but the night like I went to go watch it again with my friend, and I remember like multiple theaters were playing it, and I could tell at what point in the movie they were at, because even if the door was closed, you could hear it just going like it was just. What were you gonna say, Cole?
Well, just on the topic of the sequels, when Plagueis has, you know, those visions and it said partitions of light, it would be really cool if that was like soft retcon to being Starkiller Base's lasers.
Because that's like, pure solar energy, yeah.
Like the of lightning.
I don't know, that'd just be wild. Because it made me think about the Death Star, but I was like, well, that's only one laser.
But all the lasers.
Man, all the lasers.
So how do we make it better? There's a bunch.
Yeah.
Can wipe out a bunch of planets.
What's cooler than a Death Star? What's cooler than 2 Death Stars? Cooler than a big Death Star? A lot of them.
Yeah.
All at once. On Star Destroyers.
On Star Destroyers, yep.
Everybody's
but Tony, I wanted to before we wrap this up, I wanted to when Dooku and Palpatine are talking, that's how they find out about Anakin, right? That's like that's how they discover it. But I was trying to figure out when there is a point where Plagueis and Palpatine do talk about Dooku, but I do not. We went through it earlier, and I don't remember where that was. Where they're kind of talking about like him as a backup option.
Yeah, I just remember a part where they were like, "Don't let Dooku become a Sith. That he'll be too that like they were like worried he would be too powerful with it, and they were like, just let him come to the dark side on his own, and everything will play out like how it should." And I just thought that was just so interesting to hear that about Dooku.
Dooku is one of the is the few that Dooku's awesome, Seth. Oh wait, because you like Dooku better than Maul.
I do like Dooku better than Maul.
I go back and forth, bro. No. I go back and forth, man.
Oh, was that the thing that broke your back? Is that my? Yeah, I know.
I feel like every time we talk or do anything, Will is like, why? Why do we associate with
It's just because I every time I hear these things, I'm like, okay, we're all on the same page. This guy's really cool. And then I get to the point where it's like Connor or Seth will just be like, yeah, that guy sucks, huh? And I'm like,
what? Okay. I'm not saying he sucks. He's just better than Maul.
You will like that. That's the meme where it's like you'll say, yeah, I just don't think, I don't know, like he's all right. And you're like, so you hate him? Okay.
That earlier, we're like, you know, I really don't, I really like cheeseburgers. So you hate hot dogs? Like,
That really is how it be.
Yeah. It's just funny because my thing is, it's good to have, why I love doing this with you guys so much is because you guys, there's a lot of people who will be like, oh, there are like, in the Star Wars fandom, there are characters that are like, hey, you like this guy, right? You don't? Well, you better. And a lot of times when we speak about stuff or certain things where, like, I really don't like Grogu, but there are a lot of people who do. It's just nice to see
you want
people who, sorry, shoot
I don't,
me.
I don't like Andor.
It's just nice that when the opinions come out of the preferences and the things that we do and don't like, to have the sounding boards off of, okay, and why? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you guys are kind of right. And Seth, I'm not going to disagree with you. If I had to choose between Maul and Dooku, I like Dooku more too. But I'm not saying Maul's bad.
Hey,
I'm
I
not
like
saying
this.
he's bad either.
good
I just
time.
think that he looks cool.
Will, you want to hear what Seth did on our lightsaber battle tier list? When
Yeah.
we got to Qui-Gon versus Maul in the desert on Tatooine, he said, "Oh, you mean 2 D-list characters duking it out?"
Oh
in the
yeah, I,
desert?"
saw that clip. I think I jumped off in chat when I was like,
Oh my
whoa,
God.
whoa, whoa, whoa,
That was
Oh my
insane.
God.
Yeah, that was
Blasphemy.
I was listening to you guys do that.
Just a couple of strangers fighting in the desert.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yep.
I was listening to that when I was doing a demo job that I got hired for my dad, and so I was doing that and I was listening, and Seth said that, and I was like, and I started hitting harder. I'm just kidding. What did he say? But that, I mean, I'll go ahead and rattle off the epilogue, and that'll kind of make it, that'll be the end if it's cool with everybody. Sweet.
Yeah, I'm hungry.
I gotta use the bathroom real bad. Palpatine pledges in its chancellor, and Hego Damask's death goes pretty unnoticed in the news, which is kind of sad.
He was always in the back. He's hiding. He didn't. That was part of his.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. Dooku and Palpatine, 1 month after Qui-Gon's funeral, meet in the Lamerge building. After much discussion, Dooku admits he wants to seek out the Sith Lord and work with them to take down the Republic, but Palpatine does not reveal himself quite yet. And restraint. When this happened, I was like, are we going to get like direct acknowledgement of what happens in Tales of the Jedi, even though it's so far-fetched? But I was like, this is the building. This is the building that it happens in, which means it still could happen technically. And then Palpatine summons Obi-Wan and Anakin to his office, and he sediments his plan to turn Anakin to the dark side.
Cool.
What I've done.
Plagueis came out in 2007.
Yes.
That would be so stupid.
Directed by George Lucas.
Yeah. It's just like Anakin, meet Palpatine. What I've done.
I would have been like, I'm still watching your career with great interest.
That's my favorite thing when they did that with the Kenobi show.
Yeah, dude.
Oh,
Hello there.
It's so good mixing it. Oh.
Yeah. Hello there.
I showed that to my sister, and like she's into Star Wars, but not that into Star Wars. And my dad and I were like laughing so hard, and she was like, "I don't get it." And it's like you just
Never seen Transformers.
She's like 4 years younger than me, so no.
Just had to be.
Hey,
there.
real quick, here's a good closer for you. Y'all ever notice that James Luceno kind of looks like Palpatine?
I don't have the physical copy, so no.
A little bit.
And in the end, it was him the whole time.
Yes. Well,
maybe the Palpatine is the James Luceno we met along the way.
We got a good quote right here.
looks like
Every
Christopher
time you
Lloyd.
thought they were your ideas, they were mine.
Is that a quote in the book?
Yeah, doesn't he says that he's like, doesn't he say that to Plagueis? He's been putting thoughts into his head
in his whole monologue. He's like,
yeah,
man, you're stupid, man.
It's good.
He does really roast Plagueis there at the end, but yeah, I know that was a lot to cover in one episode, guys. So both to my friends and to the audience, or if you're listening after the fact, thank you for going along with us on this journey. Do you guys have any parting thoughts on Plagueis before we reveal the next 2 books on our list and get on out of here? Make like a tree and get out of here,
I got one. I'm done with this. We're talking about something else now.
Well, that was so cool that you threw it and it came across
the screen. Yeah.
I was like, what?
Wow.
We're in the same room.
Wait, you do that again, and then I'll throw mine, and it'll look like it's.
I have to go all the way over there and pick it up.
Hold
I can't.
on.
That was dope.
You're not gonna go.
That felt like the Matrix.
I can't reach it.
Would you like pass it on? Like I don't have the book though.
Whoa! Wait.
Other way. Oh, there it goes.
Too soon.
I don't understand mirrors, guys. I apologize.
Right now.
I don't get mirrors.
Oh, they want to know what book's next.
Yes.
Tony, take it, man.
Oh,
next
well,
book.
Shell
The next-
Silverstein's
Yeah.
We're the sidewalk.
Our next book.
Winter of the Mind's Eye. It's going to be great.
Yes, it's going to be solid. No,
You think I don't want to read that?
the next book is kind of a no-brainer. We've had it highly requested, and it only makes sense as none of us here have read it. Tony, go and show it.
Bam.
Dark Disciple, baby. That is the next book on our list in tandem with Bad Batch Season 3. It's a pretty short one, so we're going to decide how we want to do if we want to make it just one big stream or two smaller streams, but we will keep you guys updated. Hopefully maybe here in the next week or two we can announce a official date on that, just because we have kind of busy schedules and whatnot. We'll be doing our Bad Batch stuff, so but tentatively about a month. Just get on reading. And what?
Why is
I'm
why do
Quinlan
you have
Voss.
the tape?
I'm
Oh, you're
Quinlan
Quinlan
Oh,
Voss.
yo! Wait, Tony, play the clip.
Oh, hold on. So you're who?
Quinlan Voss.
Quinlan was here.
Guys, and at next MegaCon next year, you can meet Quinlan Voss himself right there.
That's so stupid. Why? Why do you have that ready to go?
Because our buddy Quinlan.
Yeah, there's a guy in the
You
chat.
tell me you did it?
Quinlan Voss. So every
You just
time he
have that
comes
ready
in,
for him? That's so awesome. You just
every
have that
time
ready
he
for
comes,
him?
yep. Every time
That's
he comes in, I
great.
play that right
He
away.
was actually here earlier.
He was here
I saw him
earlier.
I just didn't
What
know that's
book?
why you have that ready and teed up. That's so funny.
Yep, just for him. Every
Well,
stream.
The next book after Dark Disciple will be a brand new book. Well, we're about to tell you, if you're still here, Quinlan, this was a while ago. It will be the Living Force by John Jackson Miller, which releases at the very beginning of April. So whether we do Dark Disciple in 2 parts or 1 part, that will be the next book that we do. So we'll be doing a brand new book all together. It should be a good time.
What's the Living Force?
What is the Living Force?
Yeah.
Well, it's an energy field created
It
by all
surrounds
living things.
everything.
Just for people who don't know.
I actually don't have a clue. What's this book?
So
Tell me
it is.
I know you're excited about it.
I am very excited about it. It's written by John Jackson Miller. It is set right before The Phantom Menace, and it is
this book.
Yes, but it's about the Jedi, it is basically, for lack of a better term, the final big mission that the Jedi does before like the Clone Wars, before the Phantom Menace and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And
they like it's all of them, right?
It's the entire Jedi Council and also Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
There's my dude.
Who, Ki-Adi-Mundi?
No, the one with who's got the long neck. What's his name? The Yaddle
Yarl Poof.
Yeah, Yarl Poof.
We got Evan Peel, we got Yaddle, we got Adi Gallia, we got Ki-Adi-Mundi, we got Stacey Tin, we got the freaking Apo Rancisis, we got Aegon Kolar, we got Plo Koon, we got Depa Balaba, Mace Windu, Yoda, and Yaddle.
Brother, what in the world? Why can you rattle all those off?
Because I'm a loser.
I'm a Star Wars nerd too, but I don't know all those guys.
Impressive.
If you want to know the lore of why I know Apo Rancisis, it's because it was my Twitter handle for a long time.
Dude, Apo Rancisis is actually one of my he's one of my favorite obscure Jedi.
He's like in nothing though.
I know. I just think I think it's because of Gindy's. He just looks weird.
He does look weird.
In Robot Chicken, Yarl Poof calls him Dogface.
I love it.
Let me pull up the synopsis for the Living Force just real quick.
The pizzas. Fear leads to anger, and anger leads to never letting anyone else talk.
It's so good. And then him in the Death Star cantina giving him, you forgot crackers.
Here it is, Grayson.
I got it right here. We'll see which one you're doing. Yeah, there you go. I've got it right here on Google Books.
Yes, we do.
In the year before the Phantom Menace, Yoda, Mace Windu, and the entire Jedi Council confront a galaxy on the brink of change. The Jedi have always traveled the stars, defending peace and justice across the galaxy, but the galaxy is changing, and along with it, the Jedi Order. More and more, the Order finds itself focused on the future of the Republic, secluded on Coruscant, where the 12 members of the Jedi Council weigh crises on a galactic scale. As yet another Jedi outpost left over from the Republic's golden age is set to be decommissioned on the planet Quinn. Qui-Gon Jinn challenges the Council about the increasing isolation of the Order. Mace Windu suggests a bold response. All 12 Jedi Masters will embark on a goodwill mission to help the planet and remind the people of the galaxy that the Jedi remain as a stalwart and present as they have been across the ages. But the arrival of the Jedi leadership is not seen by all as a cause for celebration. Warring pirate factions have infested the sector in the increasing absence of the Jedi. To maintain their dominance, the pirates unite, intent on assassinating the Council, and they are willing to destroy countless innocent lives to secure their power. Cut off from Coruscant, the Jedi Masters must reckon with an unwelcome truth that while no one thinks more about the future than the Jedi Council, nobody needs their help more than those living in the present.
Cool.
Wow.
Some pirates.
Very cool. So yeah, I think it's a book that's really highly anticipated in the Star Wars community. And so Dark Disciple is kind of a quick and easy read. I think it's only about 300 pages. Go ahead and grab a copy or get one digital copy or whatever. And yeah, we will keep you guys updated with it, like the next week or two on what we're going to be covering and when the stream will be. But for now, just go and start reading because that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Guys,
yeah.
It's been an honor.
This has been a great series of streams. I'm very excited for our next book and the books beyond that. So, yeah, thank you guys all for listening or watching wherever you are, and thank you from my friends for just doing this because it's a great. I know it's a long 3 hour span, but I really enjoy it getting into the weeds with it. So yeah.
Flies.
All right.
Yes, and thank you everybody in the chat as well. We appreciate you guys. Thank you all.
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Thanks, Rich.
Bye, guys.
Citizen.
Obi-Wan!